Hello, everybody. Welcome to the fourth Women's Speed Chess Championship qualifier. Today will be a 5-minute plus 1 second increment time control. So yesterday we saw Bullet, and that was crazy. 1 minute plus 1 second increment. Today we're back to 5 minutes with a 1 second increment, but only 9 rounds instead of the 21 before we get to the knockout stage, just like we do every single day. So hope you're having a good Sunday. If you're new to the channel, you're new to the event, it's been a lot of fun. Some of the best female players in the world taking part. And we have takeoff here. We have games starting. I'll open a bunch of them. It is 5 minutes today, so I'll be able to look through more games in a given round. We have Lile Koridze, a popular streamer playing on Grandmaster Antonetta Stefanova. And we have an exchange Slav. So we actually have seen the exchange Slav quite regularly throughout this tournament. And it makes a lot of sense, especially in a quicker time control game, because your piece placement is more obvious than it is in some other lines. And what do I mean by that? Here, White's knight wants to go to f3. You may play bishop d3 to trade off the bishops. You castle kingside. You play a rook on c1. Many of the plans come quite naturally to the players, and so it becomes a very understandable decision for a blitz game, especially if you are playing somebody who's a bit higher rated than you are. And note that the bishop went to e7 rather than doing the same thing to trade off the bishops. If you trade off this dark square bishop, when knight a4 happens, knight c5 is more available. But with the bishop on e7, you can often just take this knight on c5 when it gets there. So neither side has done anything drastic just yet. Queen to b6 will allow pawn to b4, just try to close off the queen side, gain more space. Of course, knight a4 will also be an option there. So black jumps in first. Knight a5 wants to get into c4. I expect knight e5 to be the response. There it is. Black can play knight d7, trying to trade off this knight on e5, and then go for the c4 square. But even when this knight gets to c4, it's often not so scary. You can play rook c2, you can play rook c1. You just have to make sure that you don't accidentally drop some pieces on the queen side. I wouldn't want to allow my opponent's knight to c4 without gaining something in return. It's just a nice aggressive move without any real repercussions. So I think Stefanova, all things considered, she has a good position out of the opening. This move, knight a4, is tricky, threatening some kind of knight takes e7, queen d7, knight b6. That's why black took on e5 first, so that the queen is not going to d7. That would be a big mistake with knight b6 coming. Here's knight c4. I love black's position now. Bishop covers c5, knight attacks b2, b5 becomes a threat, kicking the knight away from the defense of the b2 pawn. This knight's already attacking e5. If you play b3 to kick the knight, down goes your a3 pawn. I think that makes b4 as... Wait, knight to d2. Uh-oh. That's a knight fork. Maybe start with b5 and then play knight to d2. That's what you have to do here. There's a fork on the queen, on the rook. She started with b5. That's a good move. Because if she had played knight d2 first, this queen would have taken the pawn on b7, just to show that real quick. And at least you get a pawn for the exchange you're about to lose. Here, after b5, you're not even giving up a pawn. So you will play knight to d2 next. Knight c5 is impossible, because I would take on c5, and then your bishop on e5 would be hanging. So now knight c3 back. Here's knight to d2. That's a really good knight fork. And there it is. Okay, so we'll move on here, because now Stefanova's up in exchange. I feel pretty confident in her position. Let's go to Gunina. She's taking on Queen Irina. That is Irina Petrova from Ukraine. And what's going on here? So this pawn structure, a5, b4, c5. It's a very aggressive stance on the queen side. The knight on a4 feels kind of misplaced, but it's always staring at this pawn on c5, so black has to be tied down to it. This move, bishop d5, is played. So next move, you can play c4. You want to create, and here is a passed pawn. If you play c4, it's a connected passed pawn. The pawn e5 is already under attack by the rook and the knight, so I think bishop d6 makes sense. Blockading the pawn, even though d6 isn't the end of the world for black, it just creates some discomfort in the position. The bishop on e7 here is protecting this pawn on c5, in addition to this knight on d7 doing the same. But if I can cut off some of the circulation between your pieces, I start feeling better. And e4 played, wow, that's a nice tactical shot. If rook takes e4, there's knight f6, and down goes this pawn on d5. So I'm still looking at d6 though. But d6, you probably bishop takes d6, which is annoying, because after queen d6, e takes f3, this pawn situation down here is looking quite frustrating. So I wouldn't just allow this. Maybe it's possible though. Actually, there is some merit to doing that. And Grandmaster Stefanova, she has won her game against Lile Koridze. So, alright, so we see an exchange sacrifice in e7 after taking the pawn e5. So now it's one knight and a pawn for a rook. Bishop takes f3 comes to mind as an option, but I understand taking this queen. Black takes white's queen. White takes this rook with check, and then we have a fine position for white. So queen to d8, but now knight takes c5. That pawn is about to be gobbled up. And bishop f4 is a good move, protecting d6. So in the event of bishop takes f3, I can take back with the queen and not drop my passed pawn. So I think Gunina, for a blitz game, is doing the right thing here. But I still don't like the look of this knight on a4. She needs to somehow find that knight's way back into the game. And she takes on b4, trying to get this rook active. I think you can just take with this pawn to force the issue on the queen side. But we'll come back to this game here. We've been on it for a bit. There are so many good games going on. Let us go to this game here. We're in a rook endgame up just a pawn. So white has good chances to win this game. Although actually maybe not. Yeah, so you're going to throw in a check. Once this rook comes to a8, you play rook to c8 with check. So I might start with king to g7. And that way white has to go for like this 4th rank defense, but the pawn is immobilized. King g7 was a nice move. It just creates a tougher situation for white to really start pushing the pawn, gain the advantage. So rook a1 check. Next move is going to be rook a8. And so you probably have to go rook c1 now, because king h2, rook to a8, I win the pawn. So rook c1 at least offers the rook trade, forces this rook to move. You do not want to take this. If you take something like rook a8, here comes rook a1. I'm behind my passed pawn, and then my king is free to start pushing forward. So instead we start rook a2, good move. And the point is, with the 2 rooks on the board for each side, when rook a8 comes, I have to set up a passive defense, and my king is unable to push forward because this rook on a2 will be hitting the kingside pawns. So I think here the position is actually just fine for black, although white is actually trying to turn the tables and bring the rooks to the 7th rank. But I think it's okay. I think it's okay. We'll see. We'll come back here. I'm going to open up another game just because... Oh, rook d4. Oh, okay, so you couldn't play rook d7, of course, because takes, rook c7, it looks threatening, but rook takes f4, wins a pawn, and protects here. So now that I see that rook to d7 wasn't possible, and rook d4, rook b8 was played, is this rook trying to come down here? Is this turning the tables? This could turn the table, so you have to probably drop a rook back to d1 and then bring a rook to g1, but that doesn't look fun. Or rook d3. Wait a sec. No. This is not good. Rook b2 now. And this, at the very least, is going to be a draw for black. But perhaps there's an opportunity to play for more, because this king is stuck down here. So check, king g1. You can throw this rook check. This king comes to f1. So then you probably get a repetition there. I don't think black is going to be happy once this rook takes on f7, but you can probably play like g5 to give space to your king. That actually walks into checkmate, so maybe not. g5 takes, king g6 check, king h5, rook h7 is a forced checkmate. The king runs out of squares. So I think that... Oh, wait, why did the king run this way? No, that was a big mistake. After this rook check, you had to go back here so that you can threaten this. By going king f1 in the game, you allowed this rook to come take the pawn and protect f7. Uh-oh, an understandable mistake bringing the king towards the center. But here it turns into a defeat. It should, I think, because you're up 1 pawn. And I guess it's not end of the game just yet, but this king is cut off from the king side. So the black king can just start marching in, and then rook f4, and then king h4. h5 as well looks fine. And at a certain point, white just can't move. This rook is stuck protecting this pawn here. And rook f4 can come next, and then g4. This rook and king situation is just prime for black to win this game. What a turnaround here. That was not expected, honestly. I thought that this was going to, from the very start, white was up a pawn and looked like a great position. Now the black king's on f5. You can play g4. You're threatening rook e4 to win this pawn. Takes with the king. King comes right back to f6. Pawn comes to e5. Or rook h4, even better. Just winning this pawn. That's a 3rd pawn. That's going to be a victory for Marta Bartel here. And it's an upset based on the blitz ratings here on Chess.com. But clearly, Marta playing excellent chess, and she gets the W. So let's keep on going. We'll go back to Gunina's game. Whoa, this is some weird stuff happening here. Queen takes d4. Knight e2. if you take the queen. So you have to take this here and then take back. Only chance. Because queen d4, knight e2 check is a problem. So she takes. And you have to play them more quickly, I think, because now she's down 15 seconds in addition to having her knight pinned to her rook. Rook to d8 is met by rook to d1. You give up this to play bishop b6, but this is actually losing anyway. So unfortunately for Gunina, bishop c6 is more direct. That for sure is a good move. I guess bishop b6 just take on the pawn. No, it's a big problem. Bishop c5 is a good attempt, but why not just rook to d8? And then you gobble up this pawn on d7. This knight is pinned to the rook, so you can take this one next. Rook d8 played. I would take on a4 and then take on d7. So bishop takes b4. There's some outside chances for white to hold if the only thing that happens is she's down in exchange. So actually, this kind of position does give some hope because, well, now I'm threatening a5. So rook d4 is played to win this pawn directly. And you just have to try to hold as best as you can. So bishop c3, rook takes a4. She keeps the rook on the board, probably a good decision. And what black will just try to double rooks on the second rank here. And rook c2 is actually just crushing because the next rook comes in. So I think white needed to play rook e4 there and bring the rook to g4. Try to defend this g2 pawn. Now once you lose g2, your other pawns are also in trouble. So it looks like we will have an upset. Gunina is looking like she's going to lose her first game. Not the end of the world. It's round 1. There are 9 rounds. You need to finish in the top 8 places. You don't need to win first place. You need to finish in the top 8 to make it to the knockout. And when you're in the knockout, you, of course, have a chance. So Gunina loses round 1. So we've seen a couple upsets thus far. Let us go here. Wait, that's checkmate. Oh, it's not checkmate, but rook a1 check. It's going to be plenty good. Take on b2. And now it's an extra rook in this position. So rook takes c4, rook a4. Or bring the king back. Wait, this is king c6. Okay, she's going to check twice here. That was smart. King b6, and then checkmate next move. Checkmate on the board. Okay. Let's see. Ooh, we have a king opponent game. King e6, keep the opposition. So what you really want is the king on e4 with black to move. So if black plays king e6 immediately, that would be a terrible decision. Don't play king e6, then king e4. So I'm going to show that real quick. That here, if you play king e6, I go king e4. I have opposition and it's black's turn. King d6, I have king f5. I win your g5 pawn. King f6, I have king d5. And your king can no longer stay attached to your e5 pawn. So my active king will just start winning one pawn, then win the next, and then white will win the game. That's why here you play king d6, wait until the white king gets into e4, and then play king e6, because now this white king can't move forward, right? I've cut it off. So that's why opposition is so important in the endgames. You don't let your opponent's king in. We have just one game remaining in the first round here. And what's happening? Black is up one pawn, but it shouldn't be enough. The king is in a great position for the blockade. Rook g6 check. I don't want to see this king enter anymore. Oh my gosh, she swindled it. That was so cheeky. I don't know if that was on purpose, but of course I wasn't expecting her to put the rook on a square where it could be captured. That was nuts. King e3, and then checkmate. Oh my gosh, we're going to go back to that moment because, of course, I didn't expect rook a6 to be played. I thought rook to b6 was played. And the point is you just check this king away. But the king went to g4 because she didn't realize that her rook was under attack. That was brilliant bullet tactic right there. That was crazy. Let's go to Vaishali's game. She's on board 1 here. She's taking on, if I'm not mistaken, this is Maria Gevorgyan. It is. And calm move knight f3 in the first move. Wow. That is just... You don't see that very often, but it is very commonly done in a bullet time scramble when you expect your opponent to be pre-moving or not being able to think very quickly. If they have 1.2 seconds left and you throw your rook attacking their rook, they're not predicting that you are going to blunder a rook, but it's a bullet tactic. Just like the chances that they see that their rook is under attack aren't very high because they're not expecting that move. in which case I will scoop off their rook. That is really good skills while in immense time trouble. So this game has started off in a Moroxy bind. White has these pawns on c4 and e4, taking away squares. And if you look, White's pawns are more advanced. Black has one pawn, well, it's 2 pawns and a knight on the 3rd rank. White has 3 pieces all the way on the 4th rank. So White has more space, controlling more squares, but Black is very solid. Where are you going to attack Black from? There's no weak pawns. Now the b6 square is one that stands out to me. a5 is played to go a4 and queen a5. A very common idea on the black side of these Moroxy bind, these dragons, because when you put your queen on a5, you're lining up your queen and your bishop on the c3 square. So the pawn a4 also threatens to go to a3 to push this pawn out the way. If this b pawn moves, the dark squares become a little more vulnerable. But if you do play a3 and I play b3, that pawn on a3 is probably more of a liability than an asset, because in the long run, your pawn's so far advanced, you're going to need to keep your rook on a8 tied down to that pawn. So you're going to keep a very heavy piece, an important piece, a rook, staying there protecting a little old pawn. So I always like these positions for White. I think they're much more comfortable to play. Knight b5 is a good choice, trying to trade queens off. You have more space. This knight eventually can go into c7 if this queen comes off. If you take on d2, I can just take with my king. And my king in the center is totally fine, because in a queenless middle game, unless you can attack me somehow, my king will be safe and sound here. And there's no way to attack with my great formation of pawns. I have control over squares. This bishop on c8 doesn't have a real future, at least not one that's particularly promising. And it's this bishop on g7 that looks good, but I can always just bring my rook up to c2 to protect the pawn on b2. So this looks pretty solid for White. We'll move on for now, just so we can go through as many games as possible. Bishop on e3, I just saw this, hitting the pawn on c5. Stefanova is trying to induce b6 to protect the pawn, but if you play b6, I go knight e5, and then your rook on 8 and knight on c6 are in trouble here. So sort of a common tactic is when you have a bishop fianchettoed, you want your opponent to open up that diagonal. Instead, we see that Black chooses bishop f5 in a Gapanenko, very strong player, chooses bishop f5, trying to get at the c2 pawn. You can have c5, but once we trade queens, I'm going to win your c2 pawn. So it's an offer of a trade. White would get control of the open d file there, so that's something to consider. I actually like that. Bishop takes. If we have this trade, and I go rook to d2, you have to move your bishop. I don't know where. Bishop b3, bishop f5, then I go knight d4. I trade off this knight, and once this knight comes down, b7, e7, both are a bit of a problem. So I actually like that transition for White. I think your bishop on g2 is the best piece on the board. Maybe there are some tactics there that keep Black in the game, but it feels like a much nicer position to play for White at the start of it. So Stefanova looking to be in good form today. I've liked the way she's played her 2 games. Let's, okay, there's a queen trade there. So with this queen trade, bishop c2, rook to d2, I expect. Can also play rook to c1. And she plays rook c1. I guess rook to d2 instead would have run into some sort of knight e4 ideas. Something to consider. And I can just show that real quick. That after rook d2, maybe knight e4, because I'm attacking all these pieces. And if you take on e4 with your knight, I just take with my bishop. I'm safe. You take my bishop, I take yours. And now we have opposite colored bishops. Interesting position. So rook d to c1, now bishop e4. Seeing that this knight to d4 was going to be annoying, she plays bishop e4, but if you take, knight takes, now this pawn on b2 is a target, so the bishop would have to drop back to a3. That looks plenty good, in my eyes, for White. Having the bishop pair is something that you want to have. So with the capture, the knight has to take, and now bishop a3, because I don't want to give up this bishop. Now my bishop is here, protecting the pawn, putting pressure on e7. Once my knight moves out the way somewhere, the bishop on g2 has a long open diagonal. So it just feels like White's pieces are coordinated very well here. And I think that Black should try some kind of rook d8, knight d2 type of maneuver, and rook d8 was played. If this knight moves somewhere, you do have knight d2 trying to go knight to b3, but without these pieces in the way, this bishop on g2 may capture this knight on c6. Starting like White's position for sure. So let's keep going. We have Polina Shuvalova with the white pieces. It's a flawless fighter. Hey, does anybody like this bishop? I'm just asking. Just want to know your opinion on that bishop, because that bishop looks terrible. That is a bishop that is entombed by its own pawns. has nowhere to go ever. Typically, this pawn is on a square like a5, so you can play bishop e7, bishop d8, bishop b6, and reroute the bishop into some sort of activity. Here, bishop d8 just stares into the brick wall of the pawn on b6. So it's just not good. Not good at all. And let's see, rook to h1. There's some ideas to open up the king side, which will help the bishop in the future, but the bishop for now is very much tied down to the defense of the d6 pawn. So white has this active knight on b5. It's a great piece. It can't be attacked. Well, I guess technically you could attack it with a rook, but you're never going to take here when I have pawns protecting it. So it's a knight on an outpost square. Now white is opening up another flank, the h-file. Knight can come into c7 to e6 at any moment. Black, very smartly, trying to play g4. This knight can also come back to c3 into e4. So I think the capture is smart. That's good. Maybe g4 for white. She said brings the knight back to c3 first. Okay, g4 is very tempting. That way you kick the king, or if black takes, you just take back and your king gets more active. It's actually just a common plan in general against this king's Indian defense kind of position. You play g4 and take over the light squares. g4 is not entirely necessary, but I don't like the look of black playing g4, which is why I'm so vocal about white playing g4 now. And rook a1, trying to play for a5. That makes sense to open up the other side of the board. And if g4, I guess we can see a trade in a5, but then black will get this pawn in g3. And I don't like taking on g4, but maybe you have to, because eventually this pawn on e5 will have access to the e4 square. So it is just something that looks favorable for black. Either you open up some files for your rooks, you've opened up a diagonal for your bishop. Wow, this is actually starting to turn around. This is really starting to turn around here. You have to be very careful now. And you're also down a minute and 20 seconds on the clock. So bishop h4 check, king e2, pawn takes f3. The king will have to take on f3. That looks scary, but I guess you get away with it. And the d6 pawn is always hanging, so the bishop will likely have to come back to defend this pawn. So, yeah, that's the annoying thing, is the bishop is just stuck in place. Taking this way first, king takes f3, though. King f3 is a good move. If you take with a pawn, then I am worried about bishop h4 check. But then I guess the king can still come back to f1. So there's no concern for Polina Shuvalova here. She just says, I have control over this entire board. And maybe she's right. Maybe I'm just being concerned about things that she has no need to be. This pawn on d6 is forever a weakness. The king on f5, it looks like a strength, but actually it's potentially victim to checkmate attacks. So the king came to f1. This rook can come up to a2 and swing over here. That's why she dropped the bishop back. And now we have a trade on the h-file. King g2, good move. Rook check, king f2. If bishop h4 check, you go king f1. This is a nice little dance here. So you go king f1. You essentially force the bishop back to e7. And then you play rook a2. And then you swing your rook to the king side. That was really well done. And just because the rooks get traded doesn't mean that, oh, there are no pieces left, it's just going to be a draw. No, none of that. White still has great chances thanks to the dominant knight against a really bad bishop. So she's going to bring her king back to g1, I think. And then try to bring the rook into the game. That's what I would do. So the king on... She's okay, you give a check on g8, bring the king to f1 then. And just put your rook on one of the open files. It doesn't matter if the black rook gives you one check. Put your rook on g2. That's just a single check. The rook will try to come to b1. But when the rook comes to b1, you get your rook to g7. And that's a problem, because this bishop has nowhere good to go. Okay, here. This is exactly what's going to happen. You'll see this unfold. Because if the rook comes to b1, you're attacking b3. But when I go to g7, I'm attacking something a bit more valuable. Your bishop on e7. Behind it's a pawn on b7. The bishop will either lose d6, and the bishop has to stay on a square like e7, because rook g5 would be checkmate if not for this bishop. So if this bishop ever decides to go to f8 for whatever reason, then rook g5 is checkmate. So this is a big problem for black right now. And rook h7, it may be a defensive move for now, but then there would be rook to g8. So rook g7, this is lights out. Your d6 is lost at a minimum. So try to figure out the right way to do this. There feels like you're in almost a mating net here. So knight d6, king f6, probably just rook takes b7 is good enough. This is only one check, but it's only one check. Rook takes b3, rook e3 check now is more powerful because the white king can't stay attached to the pawn f3. So that's the good news. Knight e8 check is possible as well. Protecting the rook, forcing the king back to f5. Now rook g4, rook h7, both are possible here. Rook takes b7 played. Rook takes b3, you have to play quickly. And now rook e3 check is actually very annoying, because if you can steal f3, that's a problem. So king g6, I would imagine. King f6, I don't like allowing this knight back with check. It feels too accommodating. And now, I don't even know which pawn to push. Knight to d2, protecting f3. Rook e3 check. Think you have to? There's rook to b4. That way, if there's a5, I can take it. So, maybe bring this king towards the center. King f7 now. Oh, king f5. I don't like this because I feel like the king's about to get mated. Like knight e4, rook f6 type of checkmates. The bishop is still here, so you're not getting checkmate just yet. But it's looking scary. I can sit my rook on d6. And now I can play knight e4. I can also play c5, c6. This doesn't look fun. No, it doesn't. But 12 seconds for white. I wasn't even looking at the clock. I often just am so focused on the chess, I'm forgetting about the clock. c6 now. You can't move the bishop, otherwise white promotes. So now knight e4. And then knight e4 is just going to win. Now knight e4 check. Rook f6 check, I think, is winning. Funnily enough, rook f6 check wins. Because you force the bishop to take you, and then you just take back, and now you have two passed pawns. So rook f6 check is a rook sacrifice for the win. And we'll see if how this game concludes. Oh, c7 now. c7 would have led to checkmate. This is still going to be good, of course, but the game continues, and with 4 seconds left for white, 2 seconds, oh my gosh, it's a big time scramble now. King d6 is queen, so get a queen. Okay, she got this. Take on d4, king d3. You can pre-move a bunch, now it's easy. That's the thing about time scrambles, is they can be very tricky, especially when there are tactics involved. But when you get to a position like this, where you're just up a knight, you can pre-move a bunch of moves. So king takes d4, king g5, knight g7. And then pre-move knight e8. Or king e4. Now pre-move any knight e6 move. Pre-moving becomes much easier when there are fewer pieces remaining. And I want to go back to one moment in this game, just because it was fascinating. There were so many checkmate possibilities here. And this was all looking all right. And so here I was suggesting rook to f6 check. You force the bishop to take. I take with my knight. The only way to stop this pawn from queening is rook d4. But then my next pawn will go. So you can't stop both of my pawns. So that was looking like it was just a win. And I mean, she had no time. Understandable missed opportunity, but just a cool tactic to keep in mind. We have one game left between Karina Chess here with the black pieces. And this is a position that should be a draw. But it's also easy to envision black losing this game more so than white. Because even if white loses both of her pawns, you have a knight versus a rook that's a draw. But I always worry about, when I'm facing a knight, running into a fork. I think Karina's doing a great job here. I don't think she will lose this game. But I've definitely fallen victim to a deadly knight fork in a terrible moment in a game that I'm doing well in. So we move on to the third round of action here. Let us go to board 1. And we have Nino Batsiashvili taking on Vaishali on board 1. Vaishali, she's very good at blitz. We've seen her pretty much every day at this point in the blitz and the bullet. She's clearly super skilled online here. And she's a great player over the board, of course, but she's a little lower rated than someone like Batsiashvili, who is a grandmaster. But she has mouse speed. She's got mouse speed. There are several games in the past couple days where she's been down to the waning seconds and she still played tenacious defense or found a good tactic to win a game. So she definitely has been performing well. Still hasn't found her way into the top 2 places in the knockout. So we'll see if she's able to accomplish that today. But either way, she deserves props for a great performance day after day. And c4 played, you want to open up this bishop on the long diagonal, as the bishop here is very happy. black just castles, gets out the way. If you took on c4 before, there was queen a4 check, excuse me, to take on c4 next. So now we have this tension in the center. And you can take, the knight can take, you can play knight to c3. All looks normal. And spending quite a bit of time here. So maybe just trying to figure out the plan going forward. Perhaps not familiar with this early castle move. But this bishop on g2 is matched by the bishop on g7. That's, I guess, black's idea here is that the bishop on g2 always looks good in these sort of Catalan-style bishops. But can you get away with taking on c4 now? And he plays e5 just right in the center. Also makes perfect sense. I play knight to b3. Just, knight f3 attacks the e5 pawn. But I'm starting to invite the pawns forward in a way that I'm not sure is going to be great. But knight f3, black plays d4, and then protects his pawn here. It's just too accommodating. Knight b3 doesn't allow that same push, because if knight b3, if you take here, I chop, and play knight a5, hitting b7, hitting c4. I, at the very least, gain a pawn back, and the position looks good for white. So knight b5 played. Similarly, you can't take on c4 because I take on d8, and then I go knight to c7. So I suppose a6 first. Good move. Now the knight protects the pawn, but the knight is a bit offside over here. Knight to c6. Just develop here. I think black is doing well out of the opening. I don't like the knight in a3. I think white isn't in any real danger just yet, but it just feels like the opening has gone solidly. Black hasn't done anything out of the norm, and white, on the other hand, has put a knight over there on a3. Feels like the pieces are not as coordinated as they'd like to be. So let's go to another game. We'll come back to these players. Ooh, bishop g5. Bit annoying. Pinning. I think h6, knight takes f6 check. The bishop will have to take, then I take your pawn. So this pin is annoying. Black can bring her queen up to d6. She can also play bishop e6 to try to take this knight. She plays bishop e6. f4, though. f4 looks scary. So I said it was going to go away, but now I'm looking at this position, and f4 does really concern me here. She took on f6. That feels like it releases the tension too soon. This knight on d5 is excellent, and it's well protected, but I like the look of an f4 because you're just trying to break open the position against this pinned knight. It felt like a good chance here. So this still looks fine for white because of this knight on d5. You're going to play e3, open up the d file. Your pieces are getting very good. But let's now move on. I said I would before. Let's go to here, where we see Vantika Agrawal with the white pieces taking on the flawless fighter. It's Polina Shuvalova. Ooh, black's position is super passive. This setup here is ideal for white. All the pieces on good squares. I'm trying to figure out what's the next path forward for white, because it looks great. Can't complain about the position, but black is just kind of holding on for now. Maybe moving this knight out the way to attack the c6 pawn. So knight to d2, for instance. I need to keep my queen on c2, otherwise my e4 pawn can be captured. And if black has a free move, maybe finally this knight can come to d7, or this other knight to d7. But black is so passive here, and it's not fun to play a position like this, not at all. And so I think that black is going to struggle to find a break, but she'll continuously be thinking, like, can I push my pawn to c5? Can I push my pawn to b5? Can I play a4? Because if you take me on a4, then I have b5 with a fork of your knight and your queen here. So actually a4 is a commonly played idea, and perhaps now is the time to do so. But do you really want to play a4 and b5? It gives control over some of these dark squares on the queen side. Not exactly the most ideal thing, because if you can imagine this pawn going to b5, then this knight would have the c5 square. So c5 played by black, and now you can just take on c5, honestly. Because if I take, oh, she does take, and you'll see what happens. You don't want to take with the pawn on c5. That wasn't the point of playing c5. It was take with the bishop. But now, after, say, rook d1, I'll just put this on the board real quick. Let's say we trade everything, and I play queen f2. Now my rook has control of the d file. Your pawn on b6 is weak. Your pawn on b6 can't move because your pawn on a5 is in trouble. So this transitions into an endgame where white will also have ideas to go after this f7 pawn. It's a really bad position for black. So I like what white has done this far. She takes with the queen on d1, which is also fine. She probably just wants to keep more pieces on the board. She'll put her king to g2 after queen takes c5. Have similar ideas with queen d8 check or knight to d6. This queen is on a bad square. And yeah, I just think that white's play is very, very simple. So this is well done. This is really nicely done by white here to not risk anything. This rook can come to c3 to get out of the pin, so this knight frees up if, say, rook to c7. This is just good for white. So I'll keep an eye on this. Let's go to board 3, or at least the next board I see open. Ooh, this is... Speaking of bad bishops and bad d-pawns, not good. Not good at all. White is just... Put this knight to c4, you're more active. Black has to sit and kind of do nothing and hope that she survives. This knight can also come into c6. And this illustrates the power of knights over bishops. This bishop on g7 has nothing to ever attack. You could put the bishop on c5 and put pressure on f2, but I could always move my king away and push my pawn to f3. And of course your bishop is not getting to c5, that's just me hovering it over the square. So you're not getting over there, and if you're not getting that bishop there, well, your bishop is absolutely terrible. So I think that white should bring this other knight into the game. And how do you get there? Maybe just reinforce the knight in c4, play knight to a5, bring this one into c4. You're just creating threats all the time. And I understand that black is trying to play f5. But if this knight is out the way, then you play f3 and protect the pawn. So rook c6. f5 not very scary. Even knight h4 there, hitting both pawns on f5 and g6. This pawn on d5 can get into some trouble in the future, but for now it's alright. And also playing f5 opens up the entire 7th rank for my rooks. So bishop f8 played. This is just a sad setup. I mean, look at black's pieces, all on the last rank. Look at white's pieces, all aggressive here. And the one piece that's not is this knight on f3, so I am still thinking, let me go knight f to d2 and bring the knight in. Rook to c7 makes sense. Black may try rook to e7. Doesn't really help too much. You can trade one rook, which is good for black in the sense that f7 won't be a problem, but you're still so passive here. It's really unpleasant. Knight a5 to c6 can be played now. Plays knight f to d2. This is a clinic. It's a clinic on how to positionally kind of get a stranglehold and push forward, taking no risks in the process, not giving any counterplay. This is a big problem. This knight is completely dominated by all of white's pieces. You go to e7, good for you. Your knight can't get to f5, knight can't get to d5. Bishop e7, pieces still tied down. Knight b3, knight a5. Knight a5 right away into c6. I don't want to play knight a5 too soon because I don't want to free up this knight at all. But it's just a problem. And knight a5 played. I guess the knight can't move because this bishop's under attack, and then I bring this knight to c4 and steal the b6 square from your knight. Anyway, nah. This is bad. This is bad news. Let's keep on looking at these games here. Well, it looks like this position has gone exactly the way I anticipated. This knight took on f7, so white just traded queens. On d6, went into this position and won the f7 pawn. Pretty straightforward stuff. I feel like rook h8, king g6, knight to... I can't go knight e5, so there lies the blunder. But I was thinking, if you're able to bring the king in there and then bring the knight back with check, that'd be great. Doesn't seem to be available. That's pretty annoying. Maybe h4 and try to go h5. And watch this. King here, you even have knight h8 check. Because if you go back, I have h5, then I bring my knight here, then I try to checkmate you on h8. That's actually... Ooh, it might happen. It might happen, knight h8. I guess after knight h8, there's king to f6, which is smarter. But then white is f4. It doesn't look any easier there. But it's not the end of the game. Oh gosh, here's h5. Walked right into it. I don't think there's anything black can do after h5 besides to play g6 or something, or g5. You have to play h5. There it is. And the knight's coming back to g6. This is some fine technique here. And black has no move except for pawn to g5. You have to make space for your king. Now knight g6. It's checkmate. Mate next move. This configuration is always devastating. And white wins. So we have an upset. Paulina Shuvlova loses to to a fine opponent, Vatika Agrawal, but played an excellent game. Really excellent game there. So let's go back to this game with Vaishali. What's happening here? It looks like Batsiashvili, she is up 1 pawn, but black is active. So now both players under 10 seconds. What's going on here? Got to move. Bishop g2, offering the bishop trade. That way the rook can come up to d4, hit g4. Bishop back to c4, keeping the pawn b5 safe and sound. So play bishop f1 again, I guess, but the bishop, I didn't like the bishop on f1. So she plays rook e1. 3 seconds. So you got to move here. Both players have to keep moving. King g2, I don't like that. That looks scary, because if this bishop ever moves, there's bishop check on the diagonal with mating attack. She got to move off 1.5 seconds. 1.3 seconds, she needs to move more quickly. Okay, king h2, good move. Move anywhere. Bishop g2. Oh, she lost on time. Vaishali in the time trial. I think she played bishop f1, anticipating her opponent would play king g2 again, and she couldn't get the move off in time. So that just goes to show, when you have more experience playing online, you win games like this, even if you are the side down a pawn. Because objectively, white has rook to d5 check, rook takes h5, things like that. White should never lose this game on the board, but the clock situation is one that was hard. Here we have, just get this king. Okay, we have a great example of something I always talk about, is if your king can get to g2, you surprise. So go king e1, but bishop e3. Wait a second. This king is cut off. Oh no, h3. It's losing. It's losing. How did that just happen? Let's go back a couple moves. Here. Wow. Ignoring the knight and just going here. I guess you had to play a move like knight e6. Something like this, so that you threaten knight f4 check. But still, this position is, that's only 1 check. And actually, I can give up my bishop here. If you take the bishop, my pawn just goes in queens. And if you, my threat is knight f4 check. And as I was saying before, that if this king somehow can get to the corner, and here it's having a hard time doing so, but let me just try to show you something that where that happens, is let's say here, check, here, king f1, takes. As long as white gets the king to the corner, we make a draw, but black wasn't allowing any of that. So we move on to the next round. We have Vaishali taking on her compatriot, Padmini, who's been playing very well in these qualifiers. We have Irina Bulmaga, we just saw her win. She plays Chelsea Monica. Chelsea Monica is typically towards the top of these kind of tournaments. She had a really instructive king and pawn endgame the other day, where she ended up winning by, instead of going with her pass pawn, her king diverted to take another pawn, and then she had 2 different pass pawns and won the game. But so Chelsea Monica, she often plays like this. This kind of, it's like a quiet style for now, because none of black pawns are attacking anything. But then you go for a certain break. She played e6. Now the pawn h4 is under attack, so Bulmaga brings her knight to g5, a great move. And this is the downside of playing h5. You would like to go h5 to h6 to kick this knight. Can't do that. If you ever play f6, watch out, the e6 pawn. And f6 also closes in your own bishop and your queen, right? It just closes in your pieces. So d5 played, I expect e5. She takes. Perfectly fine move as well. Bishop can come to d3 now with more pressure on the king side. You can also castle queen side. Even though you put your pawn a4, castling queen side is okay, because black's pieces are not active. So black wants to play for c5 at some moment, open up this bishop, attack the d4 square, but it's very risky. Your king is still in the center. So c5, she's considering it. And it's possible, but this king is in the center, as mentioned. So I'm not sure I love the idea of breaking open the position with the king in the center. However, there are tactical opportunities that you have to consider. For instance, c5 takes d4, something like this, but then there's bishop c4 hitting f7. So you probably would have to just take back, and then you're threatening d4 in the future. She plays knight e7 first. I think that's the practical move. It just says, I don't want to have to deal with my king being in the center for too long. Now I can go castle kingside, and if I get there, then I'll have ideas with c5. And white castles queenside. Now c5 happens, and it's starting to look like it's going to be quite a crazy game here. What can I do? I can take, but then b takes. And I'm wondering if at some point white's just going to allow d4 to bring the bishop out. Instead, the position close up. I don't like this. No. If the king is in the center, you need the position open. The position being closed simply favors black, and because black is the one who can rip open the side of the board. If black's king were castled, then we would have g4, and white would do the same thing. But the king in the center is actually quite safe for now, and a g4 played just anticipating an eventual castle kingside. But I would play queen to b6 or maybe queen to a5. Yeah, that looks better. play b4, win this pawn, go for a quick attack over here. And gh5, so what? I take back. I can even take with the pawn. I'm not scared because my king is not actually under attack. You have too many pieces on the e-file to go rook e1 and attack me. It looks like black is just much quicker here. f4 was a good try. You want to play f5. And she takes an a4, but now f5. You have to do things like this. It's a bit desperate, but black's plan forward is not entirely clear. White's king is actually relatively safe. For the time being, c3 looks scarier than it probably is. Oh, but the queen a1's coming to b2. So b3, queen a1, queen b2 is checkmate. So that stinks. So after c3, you have to take, takes, like knight takes. It's going to be a check. Maybe it's, or just takes rook c8 right away. Can't take on b4 because c2 is mate. Yeah, just from when white allowed the position to close up, it looked like it'd be trouble. So I think queen a1 is just lights out. And there it's played. You take on c3, I take back, and I'm threatening queen b2 check, which is mate in the current position. And if the rook moves away from d1, queen b2 will pick up this knight on b1 because the king has to move to d1. Well done by Chelsea Monaco. What a game. What a game. And that's right. After this, the top 8 players will play a knockout, and the top 2 players in that knockout, so what normally would be finalists, they are the people who move on to the Women's Speed Chess Championship. Hello, everybody. I see you saying hi. Thanks for tuning in, as always. It's a great event. It's a lot of fun for me. I hope it's a lot of fun for you. Queen takes b1 is checked. Bishop to c1. And now, so white still has some chances, even though black is up a piece and a pawn and still has an attack. The reason white has some chances is like black's position is sort of closed off from more attacks. And that may seem like, well, what are you talking about? It's an extra piece. That's so much material. But in a blitz game, things can go south. You make one inaccuracy, and then your opponent's back. And look at 96. That's a tricky move. I'm telling you, this game is not over. If you take and I take, I'm threatening your knight. If your knight moves, I take your bishop. So this is the type of thing that Boulogne has to go for. And now it just requires accurate defense. Rook to c8 comes to mind. Just protecting against knight c7 check. Knight c7 check doesn't feel like the end of the world, but it feels like the start of white coming back into this game. But this is a scary move to meet in blitz. So she's spending her time wisely. We've seen players move too quickly, despite being ahead on the clock. Chelsea Monaco doing a good job here of just chilling out and saying, all right, let's look. What do I do here? This knight c7 check is a threat. Can I take here? Wait, pawn takes here. That looks a bit scary. Maybe I can get away with it, but let me start calculating. Is it worth the risk? And so this pawn, I was actually just about to say, this pawn promoting is what I'd be looking at as well. But knight c7 check. Knight c7, king d8 takes. Can she actually just keep pushing this pawn? That would be crazy. But probably is available to her. There it is, a4. She foresaw all of this. Queen f4. Trying to get to... Oh, can't even get to b8, but I can get to c7. So here it threatens queen c7, but I can just steal your knight on a8. Maybe something like this. Queen into d6. She's going to do that. Really, only option at this point. And this pawn is just trying to promote down here. Yeah, this is not enjoyable. Queen d6, you can even play queen to b6. Black is up a lot of material, so you can trade queens off and have 2 pieces and a pawn for rook. Rook g3 trying to take this pawn, but isn't that one just going? So a3, rook takes c3, a2, queen c7 check is only one check. I go king e8 and no more checks. I mean, my knight covers here. This square is under my control. No checks. So queen b4 played, rook d3, a3 still possible here. Now this one should be over. So I'm going to keep going. I'm going to go back to Vaishali versus Padmini. Oh my gosh, this position is so close. Where did I go? I went from a very crazy game to the calmest game imaginable. All right, we have actually all 8 pawns on the board. And the pawn structure is bizarre, but it looks like black took a piece here, took a bishop here, and then took a queen here. If I'm not mistaken, that's exactly what happened. that, or maybe took a knight here and took a queen here. Yeah, I think that's it. So I'm looking at the notation. There was a knight captured here, a queen captured here, a bishop captured here. So 3 of black's pawns left their original files and all of them captured towards the center. The problem with capturing towards the center is made clear in an endgame like this. Now white has an outside pass pawn, which means that black's forces will be distracted to the edge of the board, and white will use this pawn both as an asset pushing up the board, but also as a distraction. And good decision, I think, to take on e5 there. You're leaving black with some double pawns. And now rook came to f3. This rook comes to h1. I'm going to start pushing this pawn up. I need to use this outside pawn to my advantage as best as I can. And I want to distract black's forces to the edge of the board while I can then bring my king into the center. Very typical of endgames. I'm not saying that it's winning or anything like that, but it just looks like a good opportunity for Vaishali. Let's go to this game here, board 3. Divya Deshmukh taking on Potapova, who is a strong player from Russia, Margarita Potapova. And here with black, it looks like she's quite tied down, but she is up a pawn. The pawn, though, not really the best pawn in the world. Her knight can't move because she drops the d6 pawn, but the knight would love to move into c5 or e5, jump forward. But if the king is kind of stuck. You go here, there's rook to g8. I can draw arrows, I promise. And so the king kind of has to stay on f6 as well. Black is really tied down here. If this rook comes to c7, I might have rook to a8, try to scoop up this outside pawn. So white is better despite being a pawn down, and this king is trying to come into f4. So rook a8 now looks correct. But rook a8, maybe there's rook c5. Trying to be active here. So king f4, the knight is still pinned to this pawn. So rook g8, king f6. And if you take here, black has knight e5 check and it takes on c4. So I guess white isn't really making tremendous progress either. Alright, just keeping an eye out there. What's going on in the other games? It looks like Chelsea Monaco well on her way to that victory. Vaishali still playing that endgame. Here, the king keeps going to f6. Looks like we may see a repetition. And we see that draw. So let's see, who is this with the white pieces? This is Hong Thi-Bao Tram from Vietnam. So the Vietnamese women's team is very strong. Plenty of talented players here. We saw the other day the winner, or well, one of 2 winners, was from Vietnam. So here, again, the Vietnamese player towards the top of the standings. And what's going on here? Black is up a pawn. Opposite colored bishops. Just don't blunder this f7 pawn. That would be tragic. And rook to d1. I would trade, and then queen takes a3, I think. But if the queen a3, then it's queen d5, queen e7 possible, but then you take b5. So maybe this was just in the nick of time as a saving maneuver. Queen c7, trying to go f3 with check. I think that's really smart. Watch what's about to happen. Queen b5, f3, g3. Okay, it's happening. g3, bishop takes g3. Take it. Missed opportunity. It's hanging with check. It's hanging with check. Oh my gosh, it's still like a position where maybe she won't lose. Oh, she's losing f7. No, she's losing now. Queen f8 check. Queen f8 check was winning there. So go queen f7, and then go queen f8. Let's see if she's... Oh, okay, she's going to go for this situation. Queen e3 check wins. The bishop can come back to stop the pawn, and this is winning. Oh, that's painful. It's painful not because it's blitz. People make mistakes, but it felt like she had the right plan, and unfortunately for her, just the wrong execution. So she's just going to shuffle around a little bit. I think she will just resign. There it is. Let's go back to that moment, and then we'll see some of the ends of the other games. Bishop g3, pawn g3, queen c2 check is not just a check winning the bishop, it's checkmate. King comes here, queen g2 checkmate. So she had a great plan playing f3, forcing g3, otherwise my queen comes to c1 with mate. And so g3, bishop takes g3 was good. This move, she just forgot this bishop was hanging with check here. And after king h6, all this happens. There was a forcing move, queen f8 check. If you come king g5, queen f4, and checkmate. If your king came up to h5, I can even just take this pawn with check, and then I'm safe, and I'm up a bishop. So it ended up being a victory for white anyway, but That game was close. We have Daisy Corey still playing here with the white pieces. I was about to say she's up a pawn, but she's not. It's just that this pawn covers both pawns, it feels like. But I wonder if she's going to try to play e5. That may be playing for a loss more than it's playing for a win, so I wouldn't go for that. And if I were black, I would actually play c6. I would try to win this game, because if I can play c6 and then distract your pieces over here on the queen side, if this king ever leaves the d4 square, my king comes to e5 and I go after this pawn. So I think black was the only one who had some chances to win, but they weren't really that huge anyway, I'd guess. Whoa, that's up a queen. So here comes king to b3, and then checkmate. And there's a win. We see that result trickle in. And one last game here. Well, white's about to promote, and black has no time anyway. So round 4 is in the books. That's when the first break happens. It gives the players a chance to rest a little bit, to reset. And so with that in mind, I am going to take a short break myself, get some water, and we'll be back in just a couple minutes with the next bunch of rounds from this Women's Speed Chess Championship qualifier. Stay where you are, everybody. We'll be back in a bit. You see that there are 5 players atop the leaderboard with 5-0 scores. So it's going to be a really hotly contested tournament to see which players finish in top 8 and make it to the knockouts. I'll be right back. And we're back, getting ready for round 5 of action here. It's a 5-way tie atop the leaderboard. Then we see many players with 3.5 points all the way down to 14th place. And then with 3 out of 4, there were so many players. That's what happens when there are nearly 170 players in the tournament. You'll see there are going to be bunches in score groups, and anyone has a shot. So anybody, I would say, right now, with as long as you have 2 out of 4, if you can get to 7 points, you likely will be close to qualifying. Of course, tie breaks, then get into it. Let's go to the next game. So we have 2 players here with 4-0. Karina Sivka with the black pieces. She is taking on Hoang Thi Bao Tram from Vietnam. And I wonder if she's returned to her board, because when you get a break, sometimes you stay away for a bit too long, and, well, hopefully she realizes that the game is going to start. But, I mean, the players are all given warning that they have, this X amount of time. I think it was like 6-minute break, and so it's their responsibility to be at the board. So let's move on. Let's come back to that game. Hopefully she returns to play. Here we see a French defense. The bishop on c8 is bad. That's what the first thing I always note in a French defense. Look at this bishop behind your pieces here. Not the best piece. But look at all this tension in the center. All these pieces here aiming everywhere. I can't even draw my arrows quickly enough. The king can often come to f2, but here the king can't come to f2. King f2. Chop, chop. Thank you. That's a pin here. So here it takes, and now I can't take you back because the queen pins the pawn. But there are times where you actually just walk your king out to f2 over to g2. But here is not one of those positions because black is very quick in the center. So this pawn on d4 is well defended. There's 2 knights defending it. If white ever castles, you still have to watch out for these tactics that I was just showing you, with the king being on the same diagonal as the queen. There may be times when this d pawn can't capture back because behind that pawn is the king. So that's what black is aiming for, playing very quickly in this opening. So I think that so far, Elena Tomilova with the black pieces can't be too unhappy. And here we see that Alexandra Tarasenko with white, she's deep in thought, trying to figure out, do I play bishop h3, putting this pawn e6 under some pressure? But there's another issue, is that f takes e5. You can't take back with the f pawn immediately because the knight on f3 is under attack. So bishop g2 does protect this knight if you're going to take with the f pawn, but things start getting complicated. There may be some piece sacks here with pawn takes on e5. I wouldn't do that. I would probably just take here. It looks just good for black, honestly. Because if you take with this pawn, in comes my knight to c5. Like, black's pieces are now just quickly jumping into the action here. Knight c5 allows knight to b3 or knight to e4, which would allow queen f2 check. There might be some capture on e5. I was just looking at that very quickly. Takes. You have to take with the knight, because if you take with the pawn, you lose your knight here. And if we get this position, excuse me, there's queen check here, but the king is d1. So I've given you a check. It looks unsafe, but you would need your bishop to already be on d7 to really start attacking this king. And even then, it probably wouldn't amount to too much. But you should be thinking about these ideas. And knight to c5, good move. Here comes knight to, I don't know which square is better. Knight e4 looks good, but eventually there's going to be a bishop d3. Maybe there's queen a5 check coming. Where does this queen go? This queen needs to stay protecting this knight here. There are 2 pieces attacking it, and only 2 pieces defending. So you need your queen to stay on the d5, but then actually b2 hangs. So not only is there queen a5 check, but this pawn on b2 is gone. And I'm looking at queen a5. Queen takes b2 is a free pawn. It attacks the rook. It keeps the king in a vulnerable position. No, this is turning south very, very quickly for white. Black's castled. King is safe. Now up a pawn. It's a bad series of events. Not that it's game over just yet, because if white is able to play, say, bishop h3, castle kingside, we do have some pressure on the e6 pawn, and the extra pawn can't make its presence felt just yet. That's an endgame sort of extra pawn. So white is still hanging in here. Definitely hanging in here, despite losing a pawn early. I would probably take and bring my rook to c8, and then try to bring my rook into some square like c3 or c2, depending on how white reacts. But it's still not game over. So let's try to just peek on more games. That game on board 1, so she did end up coming back to the board. She is down now a lot of time on the clock here, but the position is very solid. She's going to play e4 and start trading some pieces. Well, now f5 says, no, you're not. You spoke too soon, Robert. F5 means no e4 for you. Queen to b5. Knight takes d4 almost works. And why it almost works, if I take the queen, I take on f3 with check, then I take the queen back next move. So let's say takes, I win a pawn. But the reason why this doesn't work is that after knight d4, I protect my queen. So now if we trade, I'm up a piece. I stole your piece. So e6 played instead. c4, trying to open up the position. Get this knight into c4, open up the c file for the rook, some pressure down the line here. Knight b4, taking advantage of every time a pawn is moved, the position changed. This pawn on c3 was taking away the b4 square, and Karina, she quickly realizes that, hey, wait, that pawn's not doing its job anymore, so I'm going to bring my knight into b4, and now my knight wants to get into d3, where it hits the pawn, hits the rook, and starts hopping all over the place. So let's come back here. I just want to see more games. Chelsea Monica, she's perfect 4-0. Vaishali at 3.5. What's going on here? This is a position where it's even material, but I'm worried about this pawn. Later in the game, I may be worried about this pawn. And the reason I'm worried about e4 is if g5 happens, let's say I trade queens first by g5, you have 2 pieces defending, and I have 2 pieces attacking. So your pawn on e4 is actually in quite a substantial amount of danger. So trading queens is just a way of loosening up the defense of the pawn. So I would take here, forcing the enemy knight to a4. Knight's not good over there. She instead plays queen to e5, which actually might just be smart, because now there's a mate threat of bishop d6, queen h2. I know the white rook can slide out the way to make space for the king, but that still is pretty scary here. And not only is bishop d6 available, bishop c5, maybe take this knight on e3. It looks actually more and more pleasant for black as I take a... Ooh, that's a risky move. Take en passant for sure. And the reason why it's so risky is now look at the pawn structure. Look at this square. Look at this square. Black's rook is perfectly placed. And so you have an isolated pawn. There may not be a checkmating attack anymore, but the squares in front of this pawn are very vulnerable. So bishop d3, for instance, coming after the rook. I don't want to allow f4 with the tempo. And I don't want to allow f4, f5, that's for sure. f4, f5 would make my bishop look very bad. So, wait. Can f4 be played here? f4 is possible. Because you take my queen, I take yours, and f4 takes. Now your rook's under attack, and your knight's under attack here. So after f4, I don't know what black does. It feels like there's some tricks here. Maybe queen c5? And I thought the inclusion of f4 helped white. I really believe that. So f4 feels like the move that should have been played. Maybe there was a problem with it in that after f4, queen d6, now the queen has to move and rook takes f4 happens next. That probably is quite a big problem. Yeah. Some tactics available there. So queen b5 was the choice instead. And I still think black is doing very well because of all the weak squares on the d file, especially for white. But it's still very much a game. Let's go back to this one here because things have changed quite drastically. Wasn't this the position where black was up a pawn early? Now white has played f5, taken this pawn, and knight h6 check, took on d7. So the idea is if your rook leaves the back rank, I have rook f8 checkmate. So knight f6 played, and that's a good move. Hitting this queen, hitting this bishop, and, well, what can white do about both those things? I don't think you can protect both. Knight takes d7, and very important, the knight on d7 protects the f8 square. That's essential. There's no mates. So rook f7, you can probably just bring your knight back to f6, give up the b7 pawn. Who cares about that pawn when I'm up a piece? Queen b6, forcing the queens off, and if you take on b6, I take with my knight. So that protects the knight, offering a queen through the process. That is very good tactic there, and black wins the game. So let's go back to the game here. Black is up a pawn. So black stole the c pawn, put the pawn on b5 to protect it, but now e6 is under attack and c7 is also under attack. So 2 pawns under attack. Something happened to white's f pawn. I have no idea what happened in this game. So I'm going to take us back to when we left off. So I was talking about all this stuff. Knight g5, a3. So black was up a piece, and white went to trap that piece, So black took on e3 and took on c4, which is smart because the queen can't take on c4 because e3 is in trouble. So we get to the live position, and actually white obtained more counterplay than probably should have happened. And the queen is now attacking everything. So if rook d5, queen c6, hit e6, keep an eye on b5. Frustrating for black when it should have just probably been pretty easy win. Now it's... Isn't white taking charge here? Can't take with the pawn because your rook's hanging, so take with the queen. Rook d5, there's queen c7, hitting c4. You need to somehow get your rook to h5, and even then, white king is at the f2 square and is perfectly safe. Look at the shielded king. Gets to f2, there's no attack for black to speak of. So it just feels like a position where you can't be concerned too much for white's king, but you have to be concerned about white's time. You have 14 seconds counting down. It's an even material position. The pawn on b2 actually is a weakness that we should keep an eye on, that at some point black will swing the rooks to the b file, but the queen is hitting c4 first. The rook can't move from d8, or at least off the d file, because this rook on d6 needs defense. But 10 seconds left. I'd play queen to b7. There it is. Good move. Hitting b2. At least causing your opponent to think a little bit. Queen takes a4. Now I would try to go rook c8, rook c2. You need to swing to the open file. Queen b8, I understand you're going after the g3 pawn. And rook b6? Rook b6 is queen e7. Ooh, queen e7 was nice to get to g5 even. Uh-oh. That pawn's hanging. And it's captured. That's one check. You have no more checks. I have all three squares your queen can go to covered. Rook. Oh my gosh, there wasn't a check right away, but you can't stop rook c7 now. But king g6. Or king h6. Well done. The queen is now trapped to trade queens. I don't like king h6 because exactly of this. You allow a check in the future. Rook h1, king g6, take on c8, rook to d7. Oh, this is anybody's game. Rook, king f4 looks scary. Rook g8. Okay, rook c7 played. h5, rook's back to c8. Rook h7 now. This pawn's lost. And if this rook takes... Oh gosh, it's going to be checkmate. It's checkmate next move. Take it. Rook check. f4. That's not mate. There's the g5 square. Go back here. Go back here and go king h4. Try to checkmate her. It's a draw by repetition, but I think king h4... Black has to play this move g3 check to kick the king away because the king doesn't have the square. So you throw in this check here, and after the king takes, you can even take this pawn, and now you're no longer getting checkmated. You can also bring your rook to g4 just in case to protect, but either way, it was very close to checkmate. That was a topsy-turvy game. Vaishali beats Chelsea Monica in an endgame. Finally, that game concludes. Let's see how many games remain in the round here. We have Nina Batsiashvili taking on Polina Shuvalova here. Batsiashvili with the white pieces is now up a outside pawn. She did flag a game earlier against Vaishali. So her clock, she's ahead here, but she has shown that in time trouble, it can be difficult for her, as it is for everybody. Rook c6, don't trade the rooks. You need to try to play a5. Oh, but not rook a1. Okay, this is going to be really tough for black to defend without time. I thought rook a1 would have won the a-pawn right away. Here, you're going to defend rook and bishop versus rook. That is no fun. As somebody who's defended this, and even in classical games, it's not fun when you're constantly under pressure. Oh, king e5 immediately makes a draw. Immediately is a draw. Because if rook to d6, there's rook check here. And you actually lose your rook. So she plays rook e6. She's going to just now do this. Oh my gosh, she might lose in time. Just pre-move things. Go to the last rank. King g1. I mean b8. My mind's flipped. Gain some time. Good. Rook here. Rook b4. Good. Rook just... Yeah, king c7. Rook c7. The reason I'm worried about her clock... Okay, they make a draw. That was a worrisome moment there. Really worrisome moment. And we have Alina Danilyan here with the white pieces. And she's down a pawn. She should hold this game because she's got the enemy king cut off. And her king is about to blockade the pawn. So it should be quite an easy draw. But the winner of last year's event, Alina Danilyan, she's in the middle of the pack here in this qualifier. So this is just going to be... We're already moved 111, by the way. But it should just be a straightforward defense for her. There is opportunity to go wrong. F4 check now. Uh-oh, rook g2 check. This is going poorly. Suddenly it's going poorly. Check on a4. Check on a3. Check on a2. Back to a1. Good. Okay, so she's going to hold this. But she's only holding this so easily because black made it easier. Right here, instead of f3, you bring your rook back and you try to win, or bring your rook up. It's not going to be a win because there's so many checks over here, but maybe even rook to e2, for instance. Like, then the king comes to g4, and I get it's not going to be a win, but in time trouble, you need to make it as tricky as possible for your opponent. Olga Giria, she's up towards the top there with 4.5 out of 5. We have only one player with a perfect 5-0 score, Elena Tamilova, but Olga Giria, one of the top players from Russia, she moved up to 4.5 out of 5, and I feel like in these past 2 days it's been all Gunina, Goryachkina has been up there, Karina Amertsumova, Apollina Shuvalova, these Russian players, but Giria now is playing and is right there towards the top. So d4, opponent again not at the board at the start of the game, but finally has a move. So let's go to board 1. We have Vaishali taking on Elena Tamilova. So this position has an isolated pawn. This knight on b3 hits the bishop on c5. Queen takes d5 is possible here, but then black gets knight f6 with the tempo, and the queen can castle. You give up the pawn in the center for rapid development and compensation in the form of control over squares, easy access to some of the dynamic possibilities that otherwise are not possible. So also queen d5, you have to watch out for knight to b4, which that's actually probably just a problem. Hitting the queen, hitting the pawn here, and my queen helps out in defense here. That looks like an issue. But even if there were not knight to b4, I was thinking just knight f6, you just develop and you have compensation. Bishop g5 is a weird move. Weird move here. What if I just take this? I mean, your knight is out here, so even queen e5, hitting b2, hitting g5, that looks playable, if not pleasant, for black. So I don't like this move, bishop g5. And okay, she just developed natural knight f6, that makes sense to me. She can castle, try to get bishop f5, all the stuff. The knight g5 is not well placed. And queen e5 is still available with the double attack. Queen c1, queen d2, something like that, protecting the knight. I like the queen in the center. Now it doesn't make as much sense because the knight would come back to f3, and if the queen were on e5, it would be under attack. So rook e8, the bishop can go to f5, it can go to g4, depending on how white continues. So I think black completes her development. Can't complain too much, though this knight, well, one of the knights, can come to d4. You blockade this isolated pawn. So you blockade it for now, and then eventually attack it. You put pressure on it. And black is stuck to its defense. This bishop on c8, unless you do something now, and that's why she put bishop g4. Let's say you play bishop e6 or something. Then when I do this, your bishop is very weak. It has no real diagonal to work with, and then I'm going to start applying some pressure on your center. So she brings the bishop to h5. Please play g4, she says. My bishop just drops back, and now your king is weak. You can play knight to d4, trade off the bishops. I would do something like that, play for a slight advantage. Let's keep going. Let's go to more games. We have Alina Bivol with the white pieces here, taking on Karina Sufka to e4, and that opens up this bishop. I like black's position, but eventually a5 has to be played. You need to do something about black's pawn structure, because right now, look at this pawn chain, and look at this pawn chain. Black has more space and a very sound pawn structure. a5 is at least trying to create a weakness, and if you take here, now you have split pawns. Olga Giria won. Wait, what? I'm sorry, what just happened here? Look at this. Knight b5, a6, knight takes c7 check, a queen blunder. This just wasn't her game. I mean, bishop d6 already walked into knight b5, so that wasn't good. But knight takes d5 was also a threat. This is all opening theory. And with that in mind, black should probably go queen to b6 to walk out of the pins. But playing here, knight b5, if you go back, takes, even queen takes b7, down goes c6 next. This is already bad for black. But obviously a6 allowing knight takes c7 is, well, it was resignable, and she did indeed resign. So Olga Giria moves up to 5 out of 6. She's currently in first place, but she will not be alone after this round because someone has 5 out of 5, and the person with 5 is playing with someone with 4.5. There are other 4.5 matchups, so people will join Olga Giria at the top. But Giria having a great start to this event, she's a very strong player. So in this game between Alina Bivol and Karina Sufka, I was saying you need to create weaknesses in black's position. Let's just go back a couple moves before white went a5. Like, look at these pawn chains, safe and sound, everything looking good for black. Let's go to the game position, and this pawn, a little weaker, not exactly the most inspiring of pawn structures. And bishop takes a4. Take me on f4. I dare you. I'll just take back. I'm up in exchange. So even though my king is weak, I'm not going to deny that. Where's your attack coming from? Right? You can't just give up pieces and pray for counterplay. You need to really concretely see it. So f4, I think, was a move that she's hoping for some sort of attack. Maybe bishop to d4 just to preemptively hit the f2 pawn, and so you can play g5. But it feels like this may not work out the way she wanted. Although I still think that bishop d4, g5, in whichever move order. She plays g5 first, and then bishop to d4 coming next. Work on my arrow game. And queen f7 to get into f3, but ooh. Somehow I wasn't looking for that tactic, but that's just smart because queen e4 check picks up this rook on d3. Well, so I was so focused on the potential on the king side that I didn't even think about how removing this pawn allows this check on e4. And takes, check, king g1, takes. I still think white is doing very well here because of this pawn and how great this bishop is, staring in both directions at weak pawns. But a good shot by black here just to make it a little more complicated. So let me look at some of these other games real quick. We'll come back here. Vaishali has a knight on a7. The king went to f8. The rook comes to c7. This rook is better than black's rook. This pawn on b6 is probably the weakest pawn on the board. At least it feels much more susceptible to an attack. And with white's activity here, it's starting to look really good. Wait. No, the rook's not trapped. I have c6, but it's getting close there. It's getting dicey. Probably knight c6 now. And then rook c8. So she plays knight b5, so she doesn't have to trade after rook c8. So knight c6, rook c8, and now you have to trade because behind your rook is this knight. And she wants to keep the piece on the board. But even in the event of some trades, if I can play a4, b4, she play a5, then white has a chance for an advantage. So a4 played. Please take me on b5. I'll take with the pawn. And now bishop takes d5 is actually a threat because the knight is stuck protecting this bishop here. Bishop takes d5, then rook takes a4. So don't play bishop takes d5 just yet. Play b3, I guess. But then you can even take this and the rook gets in the game. I feel like black is surviving this one. I think bishop takes b5 is a good move. Rook check, and then rook to b1. But then rook to c6. Okay, rook a3 was the choice. I'm thinking about b4, but that probably doesn't work. C4 here. Wait. Oh no. Oh no for Alina Bivol here. There's rook takes e3. So what happened? So took on d3. She went queen c6, defending the light squares. Rook takes, queen takes e3, and rook d7. She forgot about rook f1 check. She just forgot about rook f1 check. And if king h3, there's pawn g4. So this rook move to d7 was not ideal. Probably rook e1 was necessary, something like that, to help your king become safer. Maybe queen d5 check. First, bring your queen back towards the defense. But what she did, rook d7, allowed a rapid checkmate here. Rook f1 check, you take, and queen takes here. It's mate. So well done by Karina Sufka. That was a big fight. And what's happening in this game between Chelsea Monica and Bibi Sara Asabayeva? So rook, I can't move my rook. I was like rook check, but my rook's pinned. So queen e7 threatens queen to f8 mate, but then the knight comes out to d7. So how many pawns does white have? White currently has one pawn for the knight, and these pieces are looking terrible. But with the queen trade on the table, and if you take, my knight gets out. It's not bad for black. In fact, it's good for black because the black king, though it looks vulnerable and like there will be an attack, you only have two pieces. You have a queen and a rook, and you're not going to be able to do too much. Knight to d7 immediately should be played. You cover e5, you cover f6, you cover f8. The knight is a very good defender, taking away many important squares. And now actually black can play rook f8 next. This rook on f3 is pinned, and you're not getting out of that pin. If queen takes g5, there's e2. I think. Looks scary. Or queen to e4. This knight is so good. Or rook to e8. I mean, all those moves look good. So queen takes e3, rook to f8. So now it's going to be a trade. We're going to liquidate into an endgame where I think black should be winning with proper play, but it's going to be very difficult considering how little time there is. And in fact, white could win this game because the pawns are going to start pushing, and that's a scary proposition. Here comes the king. a5. I thought a5, a4 was possible, but instead, she's trying to get the king in. And now knight c6. Ooh, knight c6 was a chance there. She's just trying to take this pawn on h2 and win the game on the king side. So b4 takes b5. How is this going to work? Okay, this is getting scary. Knight e5? Guys, king b3. King b3 now. Play king b3. Or has she stopped the pawns in there? Wow, at b7 there was knight c6. So she figured out a way how to get her pieces back. Now you force b7, and now h5. Oh my gosh, it was zugzwang. But here comes the a pawn, so be careful. Knight c6, king d5. King b5, so forces... This is amazing. This is actually amazing. Wow, what an amazing finish here. What was going on? So she got her to play b7 because the king couldn't move without the a5 pawn being lost. And after h5, you had to promote. You have no other moves. You play h3, I take it. So we see this happen. And I thought maybe the king could try to come this way somehow, but I guess white would just continue ignoring it. And then go like this. Yeah, the knight against the rim pawn is very bad. So well done by both those players. Really fun fight there. Here we're going to see another drawn position. And it just, the pawn will promote, the knight will capture it. There's nothing you can do about it, and it's a draw. So let's go here. This is checkmate, queen g7. And wait, white is up a queen, no? Oh, that's a checkmate you don't see every day. In the center of the board, with black having two rooks. Checkmate, because the queen covers all the remaining squares, and the rook does the rest. So, one last game of the 6th round. As I look at the standings, 3 players with 5.5. Then you have all the way up till 10th place with 5 out of 6. And then many people chasing with 4.5. So, everybody still has a chance towards the top here. And we're into round 7. So, Olga Giria with the black pieces here. We'll see if she's able to withstand the pressure that Elena Tomilova will put on her and exchange Slav. We keep seeing the exchange Slav. Very interesting. As I keep saying, it's a good opening for white in a blitz game, but it is fascinating that pretty much everyone seems to be playing it. So let's open some of these other games. We have Karina Sufka taken on by Shali. and bishop e6. This is common. It looks weird because you're putting your bishop in front of the e pawn, so that pawn can't move. But the bishop will go to fianchetto, and the bishop on e6 gains a tempo against this queen. So queen b5 check looks scarier than it is. I think you just go knight c6, and this pawn's under attack. So queen d3 played. There also, I guess, if you play queen to b5, there's bishop d7, bishop c6, and still this pawn is a bit weak. So c5, trying to trade off some pieces here. If you take, I can even take your queen. I can also bring my queen out to the queen tip, but I don't like the look of that. That looks not quite strong. This knight can always come to d7. Now it can't because d5 traps this bishop in here. Or it doesn't trap it, but it's close to trapping it. So continuing the development. Anytime you take on c5, the knight can start going after the pawn. So let's move on to more games here. And bishop e... Wait, what's happening here? So this side of the board looks vulnerable for white, and this bishop on g7 looks very powerful. So Grandmaster Stefanova going right after the center, but is white really afraid? If you take, I take with my pawn. It reinforces the center, so I think you should develop your knight to c3. She plays knight to d2. Does that hang a pawn? To me, that looks like it hangs a pawn right there in the center. And I understand why knight to d2 was played, but that looks like... Wait, what was I missing? What was wrong with knight takes d4? Looks like a pawn. Not sure. Maybe there was something tactically that punished it, but this still... This pawn structure, it looks good that e3 defends d4, but maybe there's bishop h6 applying pressure on e3. The black queen can also start swinging into some of the open squares on the queen side. Like queen c3 now is dangerous because I don't see that many squares for the queen after that. And she plays queen h5, maybe bishop g4 next, bishop h6, all this stuff poking at the position. But white is looking good with these pawns for now. So chances for both, I would say. I like black's position, but as this game continues, white's central control will be to her benefit. Nana Zagnidze is back here. She has the white piece. She almost qualified yesterday, but Gunay Mamadzada beat her in that bullet matchup. And here we see that white is just captured on d5. Now the semi-open c file should really favor white. Knight a4, put a rook to c1. I mean, you can start with one, but I thought maybe black had time for c5. And you want to push this pawn. The last thing you want is to have a rook barreling down and a backward pawn that's keeping you uncomfortable, keeping your pieces restricted. I think c5 may be possible here. Plays queen d6, but now knight a4. It's going to get uncomfortable. Knight a4 just stopping this pawn from going to c5. She plays rook d1. c5 runs into knight e4. So that's actually a tactical trick. Knight e4. The queen is not defended, which means my knight is going to scoop up your pawn here. So rook f to d8. c5 still not a plan because knight e4 will still work, I think. So, but knight a4 now makes sense. Actually, knight e4 wouldn't have worked. So let's say some kind of random h3, c5, knight e4 takes. You take the queen. I take back. You take, and I take your bishop on b2. So it was no longer available to her, this knight e4. So she went knight a4 to stop c5 before it could happen. And d4, this pawn now is defended by 3 pieces for black. You also free up bishop d5 to trade off the light square bishops. If the light square bishops get traded, the white king side feels a little bit more unsafe. This knight can come to f5 at some moment to protect d4, but I like rook c5, rook c1, these kind of ideas going right after c7. I don't like the entire look of black's setup. Queen f4 also comes to mind. But queen f4, I thought that this bishop would come to e5 to avoid the queen trade and kick the queen out of f4 because you don't want to maneuver around too much. Queen a5, okay, that's even better. Putting pressure on the weak points. On the other hand, white's pawns are very hard to attack. You can try to go after this pawn on e2 with a bishop g4 at some moment, but it's more immediately clear how black's pawns are in trouble. So let's keep on looking at some games here. See if they're back to Grandmaster Stefanova's game. So white has knight in the center. I'm looking at ways to just go rook c7, rook c8, go after the c4 pawn. Doesn't look particularly ideal. We have Petra Pop with the white piece. Wow, this is one of those sharp Sicilians where both sides are trying to checkmate each other. And white will not mind if black takes on a2 with the pawn, because then the white king will slide to a1 and the pawn serves as a shield. So unlike when it's a white pawn a2, the queen can take it. Let's say I make h4 and you take here, I go king a1. Now this pawn saves my king because, of course, black can't take your own piece. You would like to. You'd like at some point to take your piece or throw it off the board, but you can't do that. So stemming from an English attack in the Najdorf, very sharp opening lines. Right now, black is up a pawn, but whose king is really worse? That's the question. And the king on h8 is okay, but at some point f6 is coming, breaking open the king side, and knight to b6 played. I can consider taking on b6. I can also just drop my bishop to b3. Why do I have to take your knight? Bishop b3 looks right. I definitely would not take this pawn a2. That seems too helpful for black. So bishop b3 played, queen to b5. Trying to go knight c4 clearly. f6, still tempting. Very tempting to go f6. Why not? So g6 played instead. Trying to attack. h6 never possible because the bishop takes h6. So knight c4, I guess I can just move my queen to d3 to pin your knight, because your queen is left undefended. Can't draw my arrows today, but the queen is left undefended, and the knight is under attack directly, so that would probably be too risky. But knight c4 is played. Just queen d3 looks simple. I'm trying to see if some black can punish that move, but I don't see, because queen d3 just attacks the knight directly, it pins the knight, and I'm threatening to take over here or take over here, open up the position some more. d5, okay, practical. Pawn takes d5, steal that pawn. Maybe take on f7 first, I'm not sure. But this knight is coming into d6. So black is trying to develop, in a sense, get the piece off the back rank. Bring knight to d6, you're protecting this knight on c4, and you're protecting the queen. So now the knight is free to move. That actually was pretty clever. And how does white attack here? Bishop h6 comes to mind. It probably shouldn't work, and it's probably just a one-move threat, but it does look entertaining. The problem with bishop h6 is, okay, if I take, you play g7 check, and that's a problem for black. But after bishop h6, you can just have bishop f6, defending here and playing e4, and bishop takes b2. So you're both defending and threatening a counterattack. So rook g2 is played instead, e4. Here comes that bishop to f6. Also, the pawn f5 is actually... Wait, can I just take on e3 then? Takes. My queen is defended. Queen takes. Knight takes f5. Queen anywhere. F takes g6 next. I've stolen all your pawns that were attacking. So knight takes e3 played. So I'm going to queen h5, but no, that doesn't look like it works. Bishop f6. Oh, because if this rook leaves from g2, this bishop takes b2 check. But h6 now. And, well, no more checkmate that I see. There's no bishop to sacrifice for the pawn here. Take on f7. I don't even have to take back. I'm trying to go for this pawn. I don't know if you'll be able to get it, but you can try to go for it. And, knight c4. So now it is a threat. So take on b2. Knight takes b2. Then rook to g6. Somehow that's actually still a game, because I'm threatening to take and I'm threatening... Wait, rook g6? Play rook g6. Oh, you have 5 seconds left. Wait, this doesn't work. This pawn would have to be gone, and even if the pawn were here, still work. Just take it now. You have all your pieces protecting the square. And it's an extra queen for black, which means just resulting in a win. Let's move on. We can check out until checkmate, or resignation. And queen a1, queen takes c1, checkmate. Petra pop, another good day for her. So I think the last chance was rook to g6, threatening to take this bishop, threatening rook takes h6. And that actually might lead to almost a checkmate. Because this knight needs to move, but as soon as the knight moves, it's check, but I steal your bishop. And I don't know what you do after rook g6. That was actually a really big shot. Rook takes f7, then there's rook takes here, takes, rook h7 only move, queen f6 check, and it's a forced checkmate. So it seems like a missed opportunity there, and then after what happened in the game, she just lost her queen, and the game was lost. So we're here in this game between Nana Zagnidze, that's Liliani, taking on Corona 91. That is Aguilar Mamedova. And black is down a pawn. When you're down a pawn in a knight endgame, it's so frustrating. It's the worst endgame to be down a pawn in. King d6. King c7. And for knight e7, there's knight c6. Knight c6. Offer the knight exchange. King d7 is also good. But play knight c6. And this is winning now. You create a pass pawn. e6. Knight c6. Although, actually, maybe she does it a little bit too quickly. Because now knight c6, you take it. I think she pushed her pawn too quickly. Knight g5 here. Knight e5. To bring it here, but to here. Check next. Wow, that was knight f6. Wait a second. Wait a second. Black is out of this. King f7 now. And you need to somehow trade off this pawn so you don't lose the game. But you can just push this pawn, I think. You can actually get away with pushing it. And it's a draw by repetition, but you just push it up the board and still would be. Wow. Let's go back here because there's a missed chance. So look at this position. This knight cannot move. This pawn 3 squares away dominates it. I use this concept a lot. A pawn 3 squares away from a knight really controls that knight. It dominates it. So this knight can't get out. So knight c6 would have offered a knight trade if you take down on a pawn, a king, a pawn game. If you move your knight back, the only safe square it has is g8. Now I can safely push my pawn. So you gave black one extra option by playing e5 so quickly, which frees up this d5 square, and when this king came to f6, it's now all tricky again. So, okay, we still have a few games going here. Goryachkina drew the game. I haven't even seen her name on the scoreboard very much, but now that she has 5 points, she's in that pack that is trailing all the way up to 5th place. So we'll see if she can win the last couple games and make it to the knockout. Most of these games look like they've come to their conclusion. So, okay, well, let's say Daisy Corey won her game. She's up a rook. I'm just trying to check out these games here. Well, we're going to take another break after round 7. That's the player's second break. We'll be returning in a few minutes with the last 2 rounds of action, and then we'll get into the knockout. But as you see in the standings, there is a 4-way tie for first, and after that, a huge tie with 5.5, and then there are plenty of people with 5 who are looking to win their last 2 games to make it into the top 8. So we'll be back soon. We'll cover the final 2 rounds. It's going to be an exciting finish, so you will not want to miss it. I will be back shortly, everybody. And we are back here with round 8. We see that Elena Tomilova with the black pieces takes on Maria Potapova here. And, Margarita Potapova, excuse me. Here, white is very solid. It's sort of like London system where black plays g5 early. So you can actually consider g4 to open up this bishop on the long diagonal. There is some inherent risk to playing g4. You overextend your pawn structure. This knight can come to h4 or to e1 to defend g2, and then you may regret pushing the pawn so far forward. Especially because if g4, eventually white play h3 to open up the h-file. So castle's queenside. White looks to play for e4 in the future. Two black pieces aiming for the center, but two white pieces were defending. So e4 now is certainly possible. Knight h5 is played to take this bishop. At least you get the bishop pair for your troubles. And maybe we can take away the dark squares. So let's keep on going, see just some of the other games. We have Olga Giria with the white pieces. She's taking on what ended up looking like a Dutch. It was from the Bogo Indian. But this sort of f5, d5, e6, this triangle of pawns here protecting each other, and the e4 square, it can be frustrating to break through that, but you also note the dark squares are quite weak. Because your pawns are all light squares, the squares like e5 and f4 come to mind for white's pieces. But for now, with the knight on b1, knight on d2, they're stepping on each other's toes. So white wants this knight to capture, so you can capture back. With the knight, you gain a tempo. This c-file, if this rook, one of these rooks gets to c1, there's going to be pressure down the line to the pawn on c7. So I do like white's position. Let me keep on going. Vaishali versus Natalia Buksa. Whoa, this is... Wait, what? Oh, gosh. Queen f6 is a huge threat. And it's white's move here. So white's not even down a pawn. This looks like somehow black got tricked. b4, and the queen's on e7, which is uncomfortable. And then just bishop a3, which was threatening bishop takes c5, queen takes f7. So the queen came to f6. Now the rook is on g8. But this is not at all what black could have wanted from this opening. I mean, you can't castle. Bishop g7 is coming next. And the queen has to drop back to h4 or to f3. Queen h4 gains a tempo on this pawn, and then you can play f4 yourself and just try to go after f7. But this bishop on g7, if you ever play f4, is much happier. So let's see. Queen f3. Probably bishop e6. That'd be sad. Yeah, this looks bad. h6, you can play rook to b1. If you play rook a to b1, you keep the bishop stuck on c8, protecting the pawn on b7. And you also allow f4 to happen without having your rook in danger on a1. So I like rook a to b1 a lot. I think black will try some kind of like g5 move. But then still weakening. g5, you have queen h5, going after f7. So it looks like Vaishali playing really well here. Okay. Okay, and it feels like now's the time. Now has to be the time for f4, right? I mean, it just looks... It looks so strong, so powerful. You can't castle anywhere. King stuck in the center. We have a draw on this board between Potapova and Tomilova. They agreed on a draw here after knight to b5, rook c8. Knight takes a7, rook a8. This allows this rook to go capture on a2. It's a pretty risky decision. And you know how I feel about draw offers. Doesn't matter the tournament, doesn't matter who's playing. Don't really love offering a draw at this point. In fact, from the black side of this position, I would consider trying to play on, but yeah, maybe this knight can come to... Wait, this pawn, I don't know. It looks like there's a lot of life left in the position. That's my main point. So we'll move on because that game is over. Let us go to Chelsea Monica taking on Nana Zagnidze. One of these knights is getting into c5, probably right now. And bishop d5, a5 comes to mind, but bishop takes g2 just in time. So rook c1, protecting the knight. a5 in the near future. Queen c2, queen c4 would be an opportunity with this knight kick. So a5 makes a lot of sense. Try to take over the light squares. And this pawn on c7 is potentially vulnerable. The knight on b3 is well placed, hitting this pawn on d4 and protecting a5 once the pawn goes there. So let's see. Let's go back to Vaishali's game because she did play f4. Bishop e6 was played. And then queen g4 here, hitting e6, hitting g6. Queen f7 the only way, or king f7 the only way to defend both. But then you walk into f takes e5 with the queen under attack with the king. So queen e7, losing a pawn here. And now white is in great shape. f5 comes to mind, just trying to open up the position some more without opening the bishop. That's a very instructive moment. If you took on e5, you open the position, but you also help black's bishop become better. Maybe we'll go to d4. Still white is better, but you don't want to help your opponent's pieces. So f5 has a similar concept, but it keeps the bishop on g7 looking pretty, not passive isn't the right word, it's pretty useless. It's not helping you do anything. So f5 is a great move. And so let's see. I don't even know what black can do. f6 is a threat. F takes e6 is a threat. If the queen is distracted, this pawn on c5 is lost. This rook needs to stay protecting this pawn on b7. This looks really bad. I think you're just losing a pawn by force. So, looks like Vaishali is going to take this one. Let's keep on going here. Who is... It's Turkan Mamajarova, okay, with the white pieces. And here rook e5 was played. This rook can come to e1. It looks like this queen is actually about to be trapped. Knight h5 traps this queen here. So if you make some random move, knight h5, queen g4, h3, and that's a trapped queen. I guess you have queen g6. So you do escape for the moment, but even bishop d3 there, or just takes, and this bishop is now under attack. So there are many threats in this position. And bishop f6 was played, but knight h5, I guess she's sacrificing her queen for a rook and a minor piece. And from a practical point of view, that looks totally reasonable. I would probably just play knight h5, but maybe rook e4 doesn't trap the queen because the queen can drop back. So knight h5 played, bishop takes e5, only move. And even though white has a queen for a rook and a minor piece, it sounds better for the queen. 9 points compared to about 8 points. Black has no clear weaknesses. This pawn on b7 at some point will be under attack, but you can put a rook on e7 and protect it. So I think from a practical point of view, it was a great decision by black. And there are actually times where I prefer to have the queenless position here. Even though I know objectively what should be better, it feels from a practical point of view that it's easier to play for black to maneuver. But white is also up quite a deal of time here. So let's keep on going to other games. It looks like Olga Giria is just cruising in her game here. She's up an exchange and now a pawn. And there are 4 pawns on 1 on this side of the board. There's 3 on 1 for black on the queen side, but it doesn't really look that way because my 1 pawn on b5 covers everything. And now the threat is rook takes d6. Your rook on c8 is not protected. If you move the rook, you lose c7. If you move the knight, my rook gets into d7 with check. Here, rook d7. Now this is rook takes h7. Now you'll be up 2 pawns in addition to the exchange you're up. The knight still can't move because of this pawn. So just taking here is easily winning. You give up your extra exchange back. But if we get into this situation, something like this, I have 4 pawns on one side of the board. You have 1 measly pawn. So I put my rook behind your pawn, then start pushing all my stuff on the king side. So she plays rook e6. And now the throw is rook h8 check. So here, rook to g6 is possible. Rook back to c6, of course, is plenty good. Rook takes g7, and then rook e7 check if she wants to transition into the endgame I was talking about just a moment ago. So this is just completely winning for Olga Giria. And if she wins the game, I guess she doesn't for sure lock up a spot. She can lose the last round and be tied, but her spot is looking quite secure. Stefanova taking on Mamedova. Gular Mamedova. And what's happening here? So g4. If you take, there's some kind of queen e1 ideas, but the rook has the h3 square to slide to. So oh my gosh. Is there some kind of potential mating attack? Is that the plan? Doesn't work. So just queen d4, but now black gave up the G pawn for no real reason. And queen takes d6. It's a free pawn. This pawn now is under attack. Queen takes f4 is possible. It's only one check here. And as soon as you realize it's only one check, you can play queen takes f4. And then after the check, bring the king to g3. And there are no more checks in that position. So white now is up a couple pawns. Queen f7 check. Transition into the rook endgame. You win the a7 pawn. This is going to be a win for Stefanova here. Just take a7. And b5. Rook a6. Maybe it's not so clearly winning. What I spoke too soon. Because now king g5. Or king h5. And if you take this pawn, black takes an a4. And it's only one extra pawn here. So g3. b6. But this king goes right to h7. That's really well done. King g7. There will be no checks from behind. And I did speak too soon because this is a draw already. It's a theoretically drawn position. You can even draw this without the h5 pawn. So the h5 pawn can be captured at any moment. Doesn't matter. And now this is an easy draw. Just do not bring your king to f7. King f7 would be a blunder because of rook h8. So the way you draw this is leaving your king on these two squares, g7, h7, and checking the enemy king from behind. So here it is. The king's attached to the pawn, which means the rook is free to go. You just check a bunch. The king has to, start weaseling his way back towards the rook, and that's a draw. So well done. Chelsea Monica loses to Nana Zagnidze. I just tuned in. There's a bishop here covering the promotion square, and the a pawn, on the other hand, is just marching up the board. So that's a win for Zagnidze. Let's go to this game here, where black has a bishop and a rook pawn ahead, and very importantly, the bishop matches the promotion square, which means rooks can be traded, and if the rooks are traded, it'll be an easy win. So king f6. Okay, king there instead. King's going on a bit of a journey. And black won time. Wasn't even looking at the clock. There's one final game. Oh gosh, rook and bishop versus rook. Bishop d4 next. It's about to be a checkmate. Nice. Good technique. And winning on the clock. It also was enough to go here. I guess it... Here, king a2. And your king is very close. So you can go like this. But the problem... Part of the problem is there may be some stalemate ideas as well. So check. If the king comes here, there's rook b4, and that's stalemate. Because if you move your king, I take your bishop. If you take, no squares are safe for this king, and the king's not in check. That'd be a stalemate. Just want to show you that there are some opportunities to go for stalemate. And here, actually, in this position, this is also a stalemate idea. If you take, I have no more squares for my king. It's stalemate. So we're going to the last round. No more analysis of that endgame. We see that we have one player in first, Olga Giria. We have a tie all the way through 6th place with 6.5 points. And then so many people there with 6 out of 8 with a chance to win their games and qualify. So Olga Giria versus Vaishali. Vaishali needs a draw at minimum. And her tiebreaks are probably excellent because she's been doing really well. In terms of aggregate score and for tiebreaks, her tiebreaks should be good. But you don't really want to rely on tiebreaks. But for Olga Giria, you know that if you draw the game, you're in. So I think that Giria would be happy if Vaishali offered a draw. And we'll see if that happens. But let's keep looking. There's so many games of importance here. We have Nana Zagnidze taking on Margarita Potapova. We have Elena Tomilova taking on Mama Jarova here. What's hard for these players is normally at the end of the tournament, you sort of know your placement. You're like, oh, I can just make a draw and win this much prize money or qualify for this thing. Here it's very much up in the air. So the players are all going to play their best for a victory, and I don't think we'll see any early draw offers. Like here, look at this. Stefanova plays as his pawn g5 early because she attacked this knight. The knight came back, and she gained some space in the position. White has the bishop pair, but what is this bishop on f1 really going to do? These pawns on b7, c6, and f7, e6 limit the scope of this bishop. So even if it develops, gets out... Whoa. Whoa, 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 whoa. That is a committal decision if I've seen one. Bishop takes h2. You can't go g3, I just take it. So that actually is the right way to play, I would say, if you're trying to win him. I would play e4 for white. That threatens e5, cutting off the queen's defense of the bishop, and also opening up my bishop on c1 to the pawn on g5. So e4 feels very powerful here. What other moves come to mind? That's really the only move that I'm seeing here. Because f4 would have cut off the queen of the bishop, but it also would have allowed things like takes here, f3. Oh, and then there's knight f4. So I guess after f4, there's knight g4, just protecting this bishop, and then threatening pawn takes f4. But this looks awkward, but maybe it works out. So e4, bishop g3 check, king d1. Let's move the king away. Looks really good for white. Strong pawn center. This king isn't exactly the safest king. It can't castle kingside because you put your pawn g5, which is hanging, by the way. And if you castle queenside, you are still walking into potential threats, not to mention e5 being a big threat for white, as the queen is cut off from the bishop. So I already think that black is in big trouble. Bishop f2 played, and bishop takes g5. Thank you for this pawn. This is a dream come true for white out of the opening. Okay, so what? Wait. We saw a draw. Did we see a draw? We did. In this game, we saw a draw between Nana Zagnidze and Potapova. So they just offered a draw here, which is dangerous, but tiebreaks must be excellent for them in order to accept that draw. Okay, let's keep on going here. We have action taking place in the center of this board. Rook takes e5. Oh my gosh. Bishop takes g5. Thank you. Queen g5, f4. There is a fork with my pawn. So I think that white is just doing really well here after d takes e5. Where did the b pawn go? Because that pawn is missing. So I'm just going to go back to see how the b pawn was lost or sacrificed. And... oh, it's not even down a pawn. For some reason in my head, I was like, oh, black's up a pawn to start. But you weren't down up a pawn for black. And wait, bishop takes g5 was missed. Missed opportunity there. Wait, bishop takes g5 now is even stronger. Trading rooks first and then taking on g5. This is just an extra pawn for white with the bishop pair. Wait, it's not an extra pawn. So I was right somewhere. Where was the pawn lost? The knight went to e5. Got it. Okay, now I'm clear. Sorry about that, everybody. You gave up pawn e5 and then won the pawn back. So it's not an extra pawn, but it's still looking like a very aggressive position for white. I would play bishop h4, rook e1, try to get my rook to e7. What else comes to mind? I guess bishop d2 with the same rook e1. The queen d2 doesn't work out as well because the rook comes to e8 and you don't get your rook to e1 in time. So I still like white's position. I think there are better opportunities, but still going well. A weak king on g8 that will need constant defense. So, whoa, okay, what is happening in this one where the king went to c2, white went pawn to b4 and a4? I don't like moving all the pawns in front of the king. And b5 was played here. c5, I don't think I love c5 either because now d5 closes the position. At least I think it closes the position. Where I thought rook c8 first, but then, like here, rook c8 to me makes a lot of sense. Putting pressure down the c5, but perhaps b takes c6 is still possible. And with that in mind, c5 keeps things more complicated. Castle's long. I don't like castling long into the scope of this bishop, but I actually don't see how white lands another check. And now this bishop can go to d4. And then you can try to bring a knight to e5. And black is kind of getting out of this. So early on, I thought this was going to be a quick win for Karina. I kept calling her Sufka because I saw the Y as the second letter. So I saw CY. and I thought that was in Cyrillic for like an S-U sound. So I kept saying Sufka, but I guess it's Sifka. And bishop d4 hits this knight. This pawn d5 needs that knight's defense, or will need the knight's defense. The knight coming to e5 to develop, open up the d file for the rook. I'm starting to like or appreciate black's position more than I did earlier. And the quarterfinal pairings are decided by 1 plays 8, 2 plays 7, 3 plays 6, 4 plays 5. So whoever finishes in the top 8, they move on, and those will be the matchups. So this game is looking better and better for Stefanova than earlier. This game here is looking decent for Olga Giria. She has a very good knight on a dark square against a bishop, and the bishop is a fine piece, but it cannot dislodge the knight from f4. It's the inherent problem with bishops against knights in endgames. Or not just endgame, sorry. When you don't have other minor pieces. This is not an endgame, but when you don't have other pieces that can help you kick the knight, then the knight just gets to claim an outpost. And the only way to kick it is to play g3, but that would put a problem on the h3 square. So this position here, white's pawn a5 under attack. She plays queen a2. Now I like rook e8, good move. So the queen came back to both attack a5 and defend b7, and now that the pawn b7 is defended, the rook swings over to the e file. I think black is fine here. And let's see. Okay, whoa. These pieces are looking good, but knight b6 is played because the king on c2 is misplaced. That king should be on g1. King really should be on g1. Now black's king is feeling much safer, and I don't think this what. Oh gosh, I don't like the look of this king here. Where's it going? Rook to d2 check. You have rook c2 to defend it, but you're down a pawn, so trades don't hurt black at all, and the king will have a safe score on a7. So it's black's king that is looking surprisingly safe, white's king that's looking surprisingly under threat, and just rook h8 to d8 now. And there it is. It's played. Black has control of this open file. So let's keep our eyes here, but go back to the Vaishali game against Giria. c4 play to kick this knight out. Then you can play d5. Very importantly, this queen protects b4. It stops the knight from coming to f4. White's position is looking a bit better now. Now d5, I think. What else can be played? b5 technically can be played. But d5 makes sense to me. What you really want is if you take here and you get into a position like this, now you have a pawn that's going. Oh, we just saw a result in this game here. Elena Tomilova wins with the white pieces. And wait. Why is this game over? So, oh, because it's bishop e7 check. Ah, I see. Okay, what happened? So rook g6 was played, saying if you take my bishop on d7, I take yours on f6. Bishop e7 check, hitting the king. If the king takes a free bishop, I take your free rook. So the rook is more valuable. King g7, now after rook takes d7, you're down a piece, and your king is no safer. So that's why the resignation happened. Stefanova wins the game. Oh my gosh, by checkmate. So then the knight came and took on a4. The queen entered the action. Check here, nice move. The rook is pinned. If you go king to b2, there's queen b4 check, and the same mate is in the game. Queen a3 is check. You have to drop the rook here, and then queen takes a2, or rook takes a2 is checkmate. So we have Olga Giria, we have Elena Tomilova, we have Vaishali there with 7-9, Margarita Potapova, Antonina Stefanova, and Nana Zagnidze all with 7 points. So actually, everyone is 6 out of 8. Let's go to those games, because everyone with 6 out of 8 has a chance here. And let's see. Bibisara with the white pieces. She is up a piece for 1 pawn. And now that this pawn went to f4, watch out for bishop e4. Queen e4 also good, trying to trade queens. This pawn on b7 can be captured. King h1 to go rook g1. And here rook g1 is great. Bishop e6 cuts the queen off from the defense. You can't even defend this knight anymore. Queen takes... Okay, takes the bishop f5. Then bishop takes f4. Oh, hanging the knight. Rook e1, rook e8 is checkmate. Even if rook to d8, you can play rook e8. So that move could have been pre-move if you want to go right into the bishop d6 check. Can't take on d6, rook e8's mate. So you have all the time in the world. You don't need to do anything. Just move your pieces. Black can't move because of this rook e8 checkmate. The rook needs to stay here. And rook e5 and bishop f7 check. Oh. Well, down goes the rook. Here's rook e8 mate. All right, so that's a win there for Bibisar. Let's check out Natalia Buksa and Solzhenitsyn. Do they have a chance? No, they do not. So players with 5.5 points entering the last round ended up not having a possibility to qualify. We see that, oh gosh, the tie, into 9th place there. So we'll see who gets left out of the brackets. One person with 7 and 9 will be left out of the tournament, and the tie breaks will not be determined until after the final game is done of the round, because they influence the rest of the standings. So Giria, Elena Tomilova, they're through for sure with 7.5 points. Great performances by them. Vaishali, she's always in these knockouts. Antonina Stefanova, she seems to be there every day. Nana Zagnidze, another good performance by her. Daisy Corey, will this be her 3rd day in a row in the knockouts? She's in 8th place right now. So depending on what happens in the last few games and how it impacts the tie breaks, she'll either be in or she'll just miss out. Okay, the results are in, and as you see them, it looks like Olga Giria first, Elena Tomilova second, Vaishali finishes in 3rd, Margarita Potapova in 4th, Antonina Stefanova in 5th. We have Bibisara there in 6th place. She ends up there. Daisy Corey and Nana Zagnidze. Unfortunately for Petra Pop, she finishes in 9th place, just misses the bracket. And that's got to be sad. It's unfortunate when you tie for a place, but you don't make it. But, you have to pick 8 people to make it to a knockout. So, agreed. Poor Petra, indeed. I feel bad. You never like to see somebody left out on tie breaks, but it happens. Happens to many of the best players. So with that, we now know our pairings there. 1 versus 8. So it's going to be Zagnidze versus Giria. That's already a powerful first match. We'll have Elena Tomilova taking on Daisy Corey. Vaishali will take on Bibisara Asubayeva. And Antonina Stefanova will take on Margarita Potapova. This is a fun series. So take another quick break because there needs to be set up on the back end here. The players are joining a Zoom call to ensure that all fair play regulations are abided by. They will be sharing their screens, so the staff members at Chess.com will be seeing exactly what they're looking at, doing a room scan, make sure that nothing's amiss there. The players are all following the procedure. Everything has been great on that front. But you need to take the precautions. It's in the regulations. It must happen. So I'm going to take a break. When we return, we'll be ready for the knockouts. They will be elimination-style brackets, best of 2 games. If it's tied 1-1, after each player gets white and black, then it goes to an Armageddon, where white has 5 minutes, black has 4 minutes, but black has draw. So I'll be back in just a few. Make sure everything is set up. And when we return, we will indeed be ready for the knockouts. So stay tuned, everybody. And I'm back. The bracket is set, as you can see on the screen now. It is Olga Giria taking on Nana Zagnidze, Margarita Potapova taking on Antonetta Stefanova. We have Elena Tomilova taking on Daisy Corey, and we have Vaishali taking on Bebisara Asabayeva. And it's cool to see these brackets because just because one person finished in first in the Swiss portion of things does not mean that they are going to go on and win the knockout. In fact, just yesterday, when there was the knockout, we actually saw some upsets, and I'll pull up that bracket really quickly here. We saw the 8th seed and the 7th seed go on, and it's because the players are very close in strength. And especially in a 9-round tournament, there's only so much separation that can be had, and you see that Gunay Mamadzada ended up in first with Harika Dronavali. And also, we have seen in some of the other events of the qualifiers, in the first one, we had the number 4 seed and the 6th seed move on. And so it's not just going to be number 1, number 2 moving on. And we had number 1 and number 6 in the second qualifier. And so it's a mix of players who do qualify, and it's really anyone's event at this point. So it's a 2-game mini match. Players get white, then they get black, and if it's tied 1-1, we do go to the Armageddon tiebreak. So it's going to be fun for sure. And I'm just waiting for a word that when the players will begin. They will begin shortly. I can see off screen for now the Zoom call with all the players. They're just making sure that everybody's aware of the regulations. And so they're about to start their games. But just making sure, especially when there's an event with people who are from many different places, maybe English isn't their first or their second or their third language is another great thing about chess. So many international players and who often are polyglots, trying to communicate to everyone, make sure that everyone understands as best as possible. Like to rematch the game as soon as you finish your first game, you rematch for your second game, and just so nothing gets lost in translation. I think it's very important, and I see the staff showing a great amount of respect there to the players, making sure that everyone gets what's going on. And, well, some of these players have been here before. You look at, for instance, Nana Zagnidze, you look at Daisy Corey, you look at Vaishali. They've been playing in these knockouts several times. So they know the format at this point. Now will just be on them to go and qualify. And Stefanova as well. She's been playing in many of these. So I see some predictions. Yeah, some players up there in the playoffs consistently every single day. It's just hard to make it through because there's formidable resistance from all their competitors. And we have liftoff. We see that Olga Giria gets white in the first game against Nana Zagnidze. So Giria, I believe this is her first event. She definitely has not been in the brackets before today, but this being her first event, we have her on camera. She plays mainline third from a queen a4 check. You have to protect your bishop with knight to c6, and this is a great matchup. You'd think that this is, a classical over-the-board event with these two top players here, but we get to see them and see how they play in blitz. And Giria plays e3. So Giria actually has the lower rating of the two players, 24.66 I see here, whereas Nana Zagnidze is 25.64. So 100-point advantage for Zagnidze, but it could be because Giria doesn't play so often online. And with the 1 second increment, that's a big difference. I know from experience that I play mostly 3 minutes with no increment, and I lose on time quite regularly, or I blunder in time pressure. Here with that extra second is very important. So I'm going to try to bounce around as many games as possible. At the start here, bishop to d7, solid. Knight takes d4 is now a threat, and the queen moves back to b3, just to get out of the line of fire here. And so queen b3, everything is safe and sound in c3. White has this good pawn center. Black would love to play c7 to c5. If you could jump over your knight just for one turn, that would be a pretty good move, challenging the center. But the reason why I want to do that so badly is eventually there's going to be a piece coming to the c-file, and then my c7 pawn behind the knight, it means the knight can't really move very easily. So let's go to a different game. For now, we will come back to to this one. Let's go to, let's see, which one's the most, okay, let's go to the one between Daisy Corey and Elena Tomilova. I'm being told that the staff members who were working with the players, some who don't speak Russian at all, had to like Google Translate and then try to speak Russian from that. But I think the other players can help out with that translation. So foreign characters, they're working with it, doing their best. Thank you to everybody who's making this possible. It is difficult making sure that everything runs timely. You know, we're playing a lot of blitz games or bullet games, and so Elena Tomilova's name, I guess with the Cyrillic alphabet, is throwing the the name through a loop there, but it's just Cyrillic, I guess, because you see Elena, and then I guess Tomilova has letters that Chess.com doesn't recognize. But either way, let's focus on the game rather than on the alphabet here. We see that in this one, I'm going to pull up Daisy Corey's camera because she always has a really awesome scene behind her. She's got chess pieces, virtual background. And with the black pieces, there are many threats. You look down the e-file, there's going to be some pressure here. This bishop on g7 is out in the open. This knight on h5, I don't really love the knight on h5. That's a problematic piece. So, yeah, we'll see how this one continues here, because black is woefully underdeveloped on the queen side, and the knight can't get out to c6 because the pawn on d5 covers the square. So at first glance, it looked somewhat promising for black because you're already castled, but the more I'm looking at it, it's like you can't really move too many pieces. These pieces are stuck d6. You get into that Benoni type of structure. Not the best thing in the world. This knight on h5 will eventually be kicked back to f6. So I'm starting to appreciate white's position more and more. Let us move on to a different contest here. Let's go to the game between, let me flip the board, between Potapova and Stefanova here, where white's queen on a3 is putting some pressure on both e7 and a7. I'm looking for an eventual rerouting of this bishop, say to the f4 square, but the rook's in c1, so clearly the rook is in the bishop's path, not getting over there. And for Stefanova, against, you know, she's probably frustrated after not qualifying. She takes his pawn on c4. I'm looking down this line here. Is there a good discovery? I don't quite see one. If you move this knight, your e2 pawn is also under attack. So Stefanova here, she seems very focused, and this could be her game, and maybe this could be her event to qualify. So bishop a1, getting the bishop out of attack so that the queen is now freed up. But didn't black just steal a pawn? Seems to be a pawn that there will be no repercussions for, at least not yet. And if this knight moves the other way, I don't even know where it goes. This bishop can even come to d5 to try to trade off the bishops, or this pawn e2 can be captured, as I mentioned. So knight to a4 played. I think you can just steal this one. Looks possible, because if bishop e2, I guess then rook to e1 comes, and then e7's under attack, c6 is under attack. There is counterplay here. I don't want to be dismissive of white's chances, but it does feel like a position that black should be significantly better in. And she takes on e2. She can bring her bishop back to b5 if she wants. This was a good move order by white, because if you took on c6, queen d7, then rook e1, this queen comes down to d2, and there's some threats in the position the bishop is protected. So that's why this move order was chosen. And even that other variation still gave very good chances for white, but here everything seems tidy for the moment. So this is under attack, this is under attack, c6 is a problem. She's really trying to figure this out. She is up a minute on the clock. That's the good news for her. The bad news is it's very complicated and things are in danger of liquidating, in which case I'm not sure how big her advantage will be. But we'll come back to this game. I want to go to the game between Vaishali and Bibisara, because in this one here, this knight on e3 is looking like a huge pain. And if you take on e3, I take back, and then my bishop has the full scope of the diagonal. In particular, this pawn on b2 is under attack. So it's even material. Rook f2 played to keep black with what looks like a poor pawn structure, to protect the pawn on c2. But the structure isn't really that bad because it's helping black with these advances. So bishop e5, you take on e5, I take with my pawn. Thank you for giving my knight this square permanently, although you have knight f1 after that to trade off the piece. And you might have to do something like that. It's not ideal because you fix black's pawn structure, but it does make sense. This knight on e3 is a very dangerous piece for you to leave here. So I think that white has her task cut out for her here. It's not going to be easy, but Vaishali has indeed played well. Bring her on screen here. She's very focused. She does take this knight on e3 now, and she's giving up the b2 pawn, but the one good thing is the rook is already on f2, so that she could swing the other rook to f1. Now, queen c5 played by Baby Star. I like that move. If you take and pawn takes, then this knight's under attack and this pawn, as well as bishop d4 being the immediate threat. So you have to trade queens, and c3 doesn't work because you lose the knight, so knight e2. Down goes your pawn. Rook to b1, I guess. And this bishop wants to go to e6 anyway to attack the... Oh no! She forgot her rook was under attack, and she resigns. She resigned. She just forgot. Just forgot. That's unfortunate. She was trying to trap the bishop in there, and she forgot it was under attack. Now she has the black pieces. She'll have to try to come back. That's an unfortunate miss there, but she's been playing very well. It happens to the best of us. You just forget for a single move. And let's go back to the Stefanova game, because Antonetta's still up a pawn here, and pieces have been traded, but now all of a sudden white is the one up on time. That's the bad news. Rook a8 or rook c8. There's knight to b6 ideas. I think you take this and then play knight to b6. And I don't see how white is going to be worse here. In fact, I think this one's just going to result in a draw. I think you just trade everything off. So bishop f6. Maybe you don't get there in time. So bishop f6, knight d5, pawn d5. Black's up a pawn, so why would you actually... This game is going to continue. Take with this one. You don't want to lose this pawn. And if the capture on f6 happens, opposite colored bishops should keep... good precise move order. This pawn can't push to d4. My next move is bishop takes, and then I take here. This looks like it's just a draw. So we see it happen, and the players will agree on a draw, and then we'll go to game 2 with an even match. Okay. A draw offered, and a draw accepted. So we'll go away from them for a second just to see the end of the first game. Oh, Elena Tomilova is simply up a piece now. This right here is where it happened. G4, queen takes, knight e4, and unfortunately for black, you're just losing material. Knight f6 check. You're losing this pawn anyway to get in a losing position, but losing the bishop was worse. And now... Oh, sorry. Keeps going back. My bad. Live board. And now white's up a piece. So if white doesn't win this game up a minute on the clock, that it would be a tragedy. So I'm going to move on from here. I'm going to go to the second game between Vaishali and Bibisara. And let's see if Bibisara Asabayeva is able to handle this position, because it is very complicated. She's playing well today, and, well, she's very focused. She's so focused, she's lifted her head pretty much off the screen. You know, you forget you're on camera when you're playing chess. You're on, the webcam on, but you're like so focused in the game, you're just, that's the only thing you want to have your attention on. So here, black has this isolated pawn that is being ganged up on, and his queen is looking here with the help of the knight. But there are tactical issues here. Thank you, a trade, and then knight to b4 check wins the rook at the end. So you can't just go ahead and win this pawn on d5. That would actually be a blunder. And with that being said, now my knight is trying to come into b4, and your king is on this side of the board. So I can try to attack you. I can play h6 in the near future just to kick your knight away. And so while this pawn on d5 will remain isolated and a weakness, there's going to be counter chances for black, and it's the exact type of position you want to have in a must-win game. So h6 is the move I'd play pretty quickly here. I would play h6, and, well, Bibisara, she's thinking about how to respond. She's going to move her knight. Here you don't want to allow this capture. Sometimes if the rook were on h1, you would allow that, because after the pawn captures, your rook is ready to checkmate. And it looks like Nana Zagnidze won her game just now against Olga Giria. So they're about to start game 2 there. But Olga Giria is now down a point in that matchup. But Vaishali still trying to figure out a move here against. So queen e6, that looks good. Bring a rook to, not to b8, to c8. One of these rooks has to go here, and you're putting pressure on White's king, which is on the queen side. So we have all the first games of the match done with. Elena Tomilova won. We saw that Sara Asabaeva, she won her game, and Nana Zagnidze won as well. So what's going on? Rook a c8. There's some ideas where if you can double on the c file, you can go after this knight on c3, but that seems a bit far away. Rook a4. Oh, okay, the knight's under attack. So bishop takes a3 would remove the guard of the knight, but the queen is ready to take this knight over on a6, and here comes the knight to c5. This knight can come to b3. Black is really picking up steam here. So I'm going to just shuffle around the boards real quick. We have the second game between Stefanova and Potapova here. The center, oh my gosh, what is happening here? Pawns are attacking each other everywhere. And the position is about to blast open. And it feels like this favors White, because if you look at White's bishop here, that's staring at the black king side. The bishop on c8 not doing much of anything. So I think White is a little bit ahead here. We have Nana Zagnidze taking on Giria. Zagnidze gets White. Playing solid. She only needs a draw to move on. So we'll see how she continues. It's still early in the game to spend too much time here. We have Elena Tomilova with the black pieces trying to fend off this, what's about to be a sort of Dutch-like position. I think we're going to see f4. We also may just see queen f3, queen h3. This is very common to go after the h7 pawn. The bishop on d3 is well placed for an attack. This rook can also lift up into the position. And it can be difficult to play this position as black. In fact, I think the bishop wants to be on d6, so you can go knight e7, but I think the bishop would already be on d6 in that case. And the point is, when this knight is out of the way, you have this move knight to e4 to kind of close down the center. And then this f-pawn can move up. But now, with the knight still on c6, I think knight e4 just will end up being a problem. So let's keep our coverage going. Let's move away from here just for now. We'll see the game unfold. What is happening now? So the pawn on g4. So she just went g4 to distract this knight. This knight was protecting d5. So he gave up the g4 pawn. And then Vaishali says, well, you can have my d5 pawn. At least I had one in return. And I'm still kind of worried about this king on b1. The king on g8 is very safe. And I like this move, rook to e8. Instead of trading off pieces, Vaishali's in a must-win situation. So keeping more pieces on the board will make it difficult for White to just find any sort of clear plan. Queen c4, you'd like to trade queens. Nope, f2 is falling. So the queen is stuck on, for now, on e2 protecting f2. Rook g1 played. All right, you're trying to move this knight and take on h6. I get it. But I can think about knight to b3. Knight b3, you may have rook to e4. That's annoying. And knight f6, bishop takes h6 is the plan. So queen f5 is checking this king. What about queen c2? Then this pawn f2, once again, is under threat. So where does the king go? a2 looks scary. a1 is bad on the spot because of knight check. Now trade queens. Trade those queens off. And take f2. The knight will not get trapped. No, this is starting to look really good for black. Because after you take on f2, you bring this knight into e4, and this knight is pinned here. This bishop is threatening a3. The knight on c3 is under attack. Knight to e4 right now. This one. Bring it in. Starting to look really good here. And I think I get the feeling that this one is heading closer and closer to being a tiebreak match, but Vaishali only has 55 seconds left. She's been very good in time trouble, but down a full minute, that's a tough situation to be in. So she's doing very well. She just needs to keep her composure here. Knight takes c3, already threatens to win a pawn. Bishop takes a3 right away is actually a threat. Like, what if I just take this pawn now? Your pawn on b2 is overloaded, defending both the knight on c3 and the pawn on a3. These knights are great here, protecting one another and creating attacking chances. So what here? What here? Which knight do I take? I think I take on c3. Although I don't have to. Because their knight c3 is still pinned. And this knight just replaces the other knight. She does take on c3. This knight is now feeling a little stuck. So king h7 hits this bishop. If bishop g5 or bishop f4, there's knight h3. Attacking both the rook on g1 and wherever the bishop goes. So I think that this is great. This is looking great. So Vaishali doing well here. I'm keeping an eye out on the other games. It's looking like here with the white pieces, Daisy Corey needs a win. She's throwing her pieces forward on the king side, but there's some problems in doing that as well. I think knight takes e4 is just good. If takes, bishop takes, well, that's a problem. You lost a pawn and there's a pin. And if you throw a knight e5, I'm going knight f6 check. A very important move. So that when you take back, I take back with some of my pawns, either my d pawn or my f pawn, and I'm starting to attack you. So knight c6, I think knight takes e4 was a good move. I think that was a mischance, but wait. I guess not really much of a mischance if you could steal that pawn too. So Daisy Corey here, she's trying to get this done to tie the matchup against Elena Tomilova. And Elena very focused. I'll bring her on screen. But she's very concentrated, trying to figure out this position. She only needs a draw to move on, but she's down a pawn. This knight is coming right into e5. King h1 is safe and sound because this bishop can't make use of the diagonal. There's a pawn in its path. So with that blockaded, this black king is the one that can get into more trouble. And an extra pawn for white, which is good for any endgame if the queen somehow get traded. I think that Daisy Corey is looking like she's in good shape to even the score here. Knight e5. Black wants to play queen h4, knight rook f6, all these moves in here, but you don't have time for it. The bishop was under attack. Queen to f3, king to h1, rook to g1. All these type of moves are... Oh, queen f3 is bad. Haha, I blundered. I would say all these moves are natural, but knight to d2 will fork the queen and the rook. Actually, it's not so bad anyway, because this knight e4 is very strong. It's the best piece for black, so removing it would probably be a good thing for white. In fact, after queen f3, a knight d2, queen h3, something like this, maybe there's even bishop takes f5, and you're going right after the black king. So I wouldn't advise walking to the fork, but it was still going to be good for white. So rook f6, very good move and played quickly. Black's next moves are queen e7, rook f8, rook h6, things like that. And yeah, this is tough. 35 seconds left. Oh, so it looks like Sarah won her game. She won her second game. She wins her match. And we just have these 3 games going. And king h1, this second rook coming over. Wait a second. Okay, this doesn't trap the queen because the f5 pawn. I was like, oh, and this bishop c8. Wait. Rook h6 takes, bishop c8. Is this queen not just trapped over here? Oh my gosh. It's happening. Bishop c8 played. You have to play bishop takes e4. Oh, you don't have to play bishop takes e4 because you have knight d7. Oh my gosh. Does this work out? So the d5 pawn's under attack. Can you play queen c6 just to defend? You defend d5, then you threaten this knight on d7. So I think you have queen c6 here? What a concept, though. You can also... There are moments where you can consider giving up this pawn and this rook. She plays king h8. If queen takes d5, there's bishop b7. Oh my gosh. Wow. And white has no time. White has no time here. And she plays rook to g1, but isn't that a free piece now on d7? Queen takes... So here, bishop anywhere. Bishop g4. Bishop g4. That wins. Because the queen's under attack, and I take on f3 with check. Bishop g4 is an amazing move. It opens up an attack on your queen while rook g8 was played, which is a fine move, but bishop g4 is a tactic available to black. And I'm just keeping an eye on the other games as well. At the corner of my eye, bishop g4 still works. I don't know if she'll see it the second time. There was a threat on g7. She's protected that. Bishop g4. She plays bishop c6. Still a good move. Now, knight f... I want to move my knight and take this pawn. But it still doesn't work because I have bishop e4. So is queen f7 back? She can just make a draw with bishop c6. And so she's relying on bishop d7. That's actually very clever. Taking no risk here. And Elena Tomilova, she moves on. I just want to show that bishop g4 was winning for black. Because after the queen's under attack, and after queen takes queen, bishop takes f3 is check. And then I take back this queen. But she only needed a draw. Let's take her off screen. She wins her matchup and moves on to the semis. And it looks like Stefanova wins her game, moves on to the semi. Oh, gosh, that is a brutal final position. So we only have Giria and Nana Zagnidze left in this game. And Olga Giria with the black pieces. She's looking to even the score. These rooks are on the open file. This knight is pinned to the b pawn. The king on f1, not really safe. This pawn on g3 doubled, but looking excellent. So it looks like there are great chances here for Olga Giria to level the score. So let's pull her back up on camera. It seems like she's sunk in her chair a little bit as she's so focused here. What can white even do now? Hard to suggest an individual move. Rook h7, rook h5, something like that. Play on the h file. She plays rook to h3. And many moves come to mind. One is c5, c4. Another is rook to d4, rook to b4. Go after the b3 pawn. Rook to d2, rook to b2. All these ideas come to mind here. Knight to d5, getting this knight out the way so we can trade here. And then your e5 pawn, your b3 pawn, both under attack. I think you can tell by my tone, everything is looking good for black. And it's even material, but take on b3. This was a good move, by the way, by Zagnidze. This rook is now misplaced. It has to take another couple moves to get back. I actually didn't like rook to b4 as much as b5 earlier, just pushing the pawns. But this is probably just winning. Rook h7, though? Oh, rook h7, there's rook f4. That's clever. Now rook b4. Push the a-pawn. The black rooks are in perfect places. Ooh, rook d2. Even better. Rook f2 check. Or rook takes g2 right away, threatening the other rook to here with mate. King has to go to h1. King f1 gets mated. Oh, it's mate. It's mate. Checkmate on the board. Rook f2. She found it. She found it. She sits back. She's surprised. She went, oh. And she now takes a drink. It's 1-1. This will be the only tiebreak matchup to play. 5 minutes to 4 minutes. We'll get her off camera, give her a little break. She's probably told what's next. But she was surprised as well. But it's still going to be good for black because even in this position here, your pawns are quicker on the side of the board as I feel like they are. And you can always throw in this check, put your rook over here, threaten the mate. King comes g1, come a4, go a3, go a2. It just, your pawn's pushing. Though white has some counter chances by bringing this rook takes the pawn, but the essential point that I'm going to show is here. After e7, you check here, and so it looks like checkmate, but the king can take the rook. And now I take your rook, and I actually stop your pawn while you can't stop mine. So I think that it was actually going to be a win no matter what for Giria at that point, but checkmate on the board and not having to worry about time trouble was great. So it's Armageddon time. And we will... Oh, there it is. So we have Olga Giria with the white pieces. She needs to win this game. Zagnidze only needs a draw with the Armageddon format. Let's pull up Nana on screen. She's had a tough go of things in the bracket stages. She is trying to hold off Olga Giria. Nana won the first game with black. And here we have a solid setup. We have the triangle pawn structure in the semi-Slav. And this is very solid for black. But if you notice, white is ahead in development. So you have two knights out. You have a very solid center, two pawns on the fourth rank, whereas black only has one pawn on her own fourth rank. And this bishop on c8 tends to be a really bad piece. So Zagnidze trying to, at some point, break open the position, I'm sure, for her bishops. Right? Bishops need open diagonals, they need open space, whereas knights, they can jump over pieces. So g6, that's common, so you can play bishop g7, e4. Look at white striking in the center already. And now knight takes c4. And c5. And in comes this knight to d6. So Gira actually has gained something concrete from the opening stage. Queen f4 is probably a good move. You still have c5 if you want to bring the knight in. You can also play g3 if you feel like kicking this queen about. And g3 played. Just trying to say, I don't really like the location of your queen here. It's too active. Go back to c7, so when I play c5, knight d6, your queen is kind of looking stuck behind my knight. I think c5 is the move. It doesn't actually look like the end of the world, but c5 feels like one that can play. d5, I guess, is possible with the rook on c1. But what about c5 for black? Opening up this bishop. Yeah, I'm starting to think black is doing okay here, but the clock, now it went from a minute at the start to now a minute and 20 seconds. And so that actually may play the biggest role here. c5 is well timed. Bishop b1, so she's protecting d4 by retreating. I think you can try to take, knight takes, and queen b6. That looks like a very good option. Pawn on b2 is a problematic piece. But black is playing really slowly here. So I actually like how Olga Giria is gaming this. Let's bring her up on camera. Where I think that she's gaming this very well because she's so ahead on the clock that even though her position may be slightly worse or there could be trouble, she is playing so quickly that Will Zug needs to have enough time to hold off the position. And it's a minute and 20 seconds right now. Black is doing totally fine. But let's say d5 happens. Now things are getting interesting because I have a passed pawn that may even go to d6. So I actually think that Giria's chances are quite good here. The fact that there's asymmetry, the fact that white is actually playing for an initiative in the center. You can play a3, slide this bishop to a2, protect this pawn on d5. You can play d6 and try to keep on mobilizing this pawn in the center. You can play b4, taking advantage of the fact that the c-pawn is pinned. And I think knight f6 is possible here, because you have so many pieces attacking this pawn on d5. And here's knight f6 played, but under 2 minutes, whereas white has plenty of time. So this game is going to go on. The big problem for white now is you regret playing the g3 move, as your king is in trouble on that diagonal. So bishop e4 coming. Queen takes h6, okay. That's also a good try. There's always a threat of bishop takes g6. There's the threat of knight g5. There's simply b takes c5. And look at Zagnidze burn some clock here. Rook takes d5 looks plenty good, threatening rook to h5. And now bishop e4. So rook h5, excuse me. And now queen d2. You don't want to go queen e3 because you walk into a pin, which is still probably okay for white, but I would advise against it pretty strongly. So queen d2 looks more reasonable, and there it's played. Just avoiding any sort of pins. You don't want to fall into a tactic. And black now down to a minute and a half. White has double the clock, double the time. So right now, I would say that white is favored. Bishop takes g6 is a threat. So trade on e4. I would take even with the rook on e4, but queen in the center looks good. Black is going to have a problematic pawn on c5 in a second. Well, actually, the rook can take back, so that's good. But the clock, it's all about the clock. And it's becoming huge. A 2-minute lead here. At a certain point, Zagnidze just has to move. She's feeling more confident about her position. I know it's not easy. It's easier for me to say that than to actually live up to it. But it's hard to play this position with a minute and 3 seconds. Queen b7 is an option. b5. Then go a4 is an option. The knight on f3 is great now. Takes in c5, offers a trade of rooks. And she wants to play rook d1, but then the queen takes, so just takes in c5. So probably king g2. Just defend the knight. h4, reasonable. Queen d5, there's queen f4. You just continue to keep the threats. Queen f4, play that quickly. Just play this move quickly. Don't trade the queens. You have an attack here. If the bishop moves away, then I have knight g5 going after f7. These little things add up. Queen g4, threatening h5. Can I take on a2? Maybe I can, but it looks scary. King to g7 played. Now maybe a3. or a4, just to keep the pawn safe. But then black plays c4, so rook c1 was played to keep c4 under control and also attack c5. Rook e4 is the idea, but actually king g2 is possible here, because if king g2, rook e4, you have rook takes c5, distracting the queen away from the rook on e4. So she's thinking, it's a good time for her to think. She's been playing so quickly thus far. What else can she consider here? I mean, king g2 looks reasonable to me. h5, I don't want to allow rook to e4, so that's why I've been avoiding allowing that move to happen to the clear tempo. And now Gira's spending a lot of time here. So what else could she be considering? Queen a4 to attack the rook, and so the knight is kind of defended because there's a more valuable piece that's hanging. Okay, now the clock is evening up. Wait, h5 played. She spent 55 seconds on the move. I actually think that was good. Because sometimes if you spend a lot of time, your opponent's thinking, wait, what's going to happen? And starts anticipating a certain variation. And doesn't have, ooh, queen takes h5, hitting the knight on f3. Knight h2, I think. Just try to bring your knight to g4. It shouldn't work out. This bishop's coming to d4. Uh-oh. So play king g2, and then go try rook h1. Rook h1 with queen h8 mate. Oh my gosh. How do you stop that? Rook h1. Oh, and Olga Giria is getting it. She's getting the checkmate if the queen moves. And it looks like Giria found a way to create enough problems. And in Zagnidze's time trouble, she started trying to move quicker. And that's it. That's it. That's Giria's game. Bishop h4 out of desperation, but you can just take that with your knight. And if queen d5, I would play queen d5 quickly, but 15, 14, 13 seconds left. There may even be knight f5 check there. I think there is knight f5 check. And queen to b5 doesn't help. Knight back to f3. Trying to get this. Okay, rook d8, but now white's up a piece. So queen takes pawn. You can even trade queens next here. Queen f4. Go over to h6. Mating attack. Rook c1. There's nothing here for black. It looks like Giria, in just a moment, she will secure this match and move on to the semifinals. Queen e5 check. That's it. That's it. So 0.4 seconds. Unfortunately for Nana Zagnidze, that is it. And Giria, she looked like, the nerves were getting to her there, but she was able to shake it off. She won the game, and she gets to move on to the semifinals. She looks quite happy. So she's probably being spoken to about when the next games will begin. I think she gets a little bit of a break. I know the other matches ended earlier, but as you see on screen, there is Olga Giria, Antonetta Stefanova, Elena Tomilova, and Sara Asabayeva, all moving on to the semifinals. So I have these matchups are now in the books. We'll check out the semifinal matchups. And unfortunately for Nana Zagnidze, another match that she just couldn't pull out, and that means she will have to work to qualify on another day. It's frustrating, I know. And Sara Asabayeva, the top female player under the age of 16 in the world, so strong. She takes on Elena Tomilova, who's been playing very well throughout today's action. So it's going to be seen if the youngster can take on a player who has been pretty lights out thus far in this qualifier. So I'm just trying to see when the next games begin. Probably in just a couple minutes, giving Olga Giria a break. And then when the matchups continue, this is for all the marbles. Remember, the top two players will qualify for the Women's Speed Chess Championship. So this is essentially the finals, two separate finals, if you will. And just a overall reminder of the format. There are 6 tournaments in total. Today is the 4th, and they all have a Swiss tournament format. You get to the playoff qualifier with the knockouts. The top 2 finalists advance. And the Grand Prix will be 4 legs with 21 total participants. and each leg will be 16-player knockout, so 5 players will not play in a given leg, and there will be switching off in that role. So I just wanted to remind everybody of the format, and some of these qualifiers are 5 minutes, like today, and the first qualifier. Tomorrow will be a 13-round, 3-minute plus 1 second increment qualifier, and then on Tuesday there will be a 21-round event of 1 minute plus 1 second increment, a bullet match. We just saw that yesterday, the bullet tournament, a lot of fun, and many more rounds. So you can play as many as you want. So let's go back. Let's get ready for takeoff here, as we will have the semifinals in a moment. Let me make sure that I'm following all the players so I don't miss out on anybody's games. And nope, no game yet. So following all the players, I'm excited for this final stage here. And waiting for takeoff. Let's see. Let me check out what's happening in the call. Okay. So Olga Giria is still away from her computer. She was given a period to take a breather. And let me see what's going on here. Okay. So the other players, it looks like they're seated and waiting. They will start as soon as Olga gets back. Give her a couple minutes. And, okay, I see her returning to her chair. So she returns to her chair, which means that the games will begin any moment now. And I'm sure there are a lot of nerves for the players. I'm sure there are not a lot of nerves. But one player who doesn't look particularly nervous is Sara Asabayeva. She looks like she's just hanging out. She's ready for this action to take part. She's a giant mirror behind her. And she's focused. She's ready and waiting. So let's see. Let's get the games going. I know all of you waiting eagerly, anticipating the next one. Let's see. I see the players being talked to. And game on now, I'm being told. So the games will begin in a second, just talking to some of the staff members behind the scenes. They made sure that all the players were ready, and here we have liftoff. So this is the game between Stefanova and Giria. We'll start with the game between Tomilova, whose username is causing all sorts of difficulties with the Cyrillic. And now, well, Sara sits up in her chair. She was relaxed before it. Now she is seated, and she tilted the camera. That's helpful for the stream, but there's no need, right? I want the players to be as focused as they can be on their games. And here with the black pieces, she has given up this pawn c5 from the Trompowsky attack, but now the bishop can capture back. White is hoping for a dynamic where these double pawns can be bad. And why would they be bad? If you castle kingside, perhaps your king is more vulnerable because of the open g-file. But I think you can actually safely castle kingside, not the end of the world. She plays f5 first, and the reason why f5 is possible is because only black has a dark square bishop. So as is needed, the bishop can come back to the square f6. So bishop takes c4. Black is so happy here. This actually looks like many versions of the French. There are some variations of the French where you get a situation like this. Maybe with no, there's still a c pawn for white, but it looks like the dynamic you do see in the French, where instead of the e pawn, there's a c pawn for white, and black is totally fine because of the two bishops. So the dark squares will be in black's benefit going forward, but it's a solid position still for white. Not the end of the world. This rook can come to c1. This king can go into the center. King f1, king e2. It's not like there's any weaknesses to exploit in the setup. So let's go to the other game for now. We'll be back here. We just want to give both games our attention, as there are two important matchups. Whoa, so white is castle queen. So Giria is allowing the capture on h2. We saw that happen earlier with Stefanova, but take on h2 is so risky because your king's in the center, your queen side's not developed. There are going to be sacrifices in the b5 square. So let's bring the players on camera here. Stefanova is trying to figure out what to do here because it's a tricky situation where you're kind of being baited into taking this pawn, but I don't like the king in the center here. And the reason why I'm talking about sacrifice on b5 is let's just look at something like this, where if I take on b5 and I take with check, sometimes your position can fall apart over here. For now, you're okay because you can bring your knight out. But let's say you couldn't move your knight out, then my queen gets it. So taking on h2 is possible. It doesn't lose material right away, but it is very risky because you take on h2, white can still play e4, try to play e5, use the open h file. And I don't know if Stefanova is really desiring to do that. Now knight takes b5 is a threat, so that's off the table completely. The queen on c7 is undefended, so the queen is attacking the enemy queen through the pawn. This protects the queen, so now knight b5 doesn't work. You lose a piece for 2 pawns there. I'd probably play king to b1. And then black can think about knight to b4. That's actually pretty annoying because I don't want my queen to leave c2. I would like to keep my queen c2, but a3 walks into b4. So I'm walking into something no matter how I continue. Knight e4 comes to mind. Pawn e4 comes to mind. Pawn e4, knight to b4, queen to b1. It's starting to look awkward, but perhaps is okay. And e4 is the move you want to play. So still no move here for Giria. Now Stefanova has the lead on the clock. I'm going to quickly switch back over to the other game while there's still thinking being done. King b1 was played. Let's go here. We've seen some trades. Now king to e7. Okay, king c7. It's just trying to make a draw, I guess. And let's see if how Tomalova, how she's feeling about this. Because she's the white pieces. I don't think she really wanted to make a draw, but a draw was agreed. And she doesn't look thrilled, but there's nothing really she could do. And Sarah has 2,600 plus blitz rating, and it's a 100-point difference at this point, but still, both players are very strong blitz players. And we get into now the second and potentially final game of the match. They're tied half-half, which means a victory for either player wins the match, qualifies them for the Women's Speed Chess Championship. So let me keep an eye on both games. This is the second game, so there's more immediately at stake. And this sort of setup, if you take on b4, I take with my c pawn. It's like, wait, you're voluntarily doubling your pawns and capturing away from the center, but it's okay because the pressure you'll get down the c file will be useful for you. And you can think about playing d5. So after castles, I would take on d2, I think. Because if I don't take on d2, the bishop can move out of the way, and then a3 will start to scare me. So bishop d2, white will just recapture. All looks safe and sound. Oh, so she castled as black. So I guess if bishop g5, c takes d4, the bishop does escape back towards the center of the board. But okay. I'm going to go back to the other game for now because, of course, I'm going to keep an eye on it, but I'm going to go back to the other game. It's further along, and there are attacking possibilities for both. White's king on b1 looks a little bit vulnerable, but there's no more pieces that you can attack it with. And I know I strongly emphasize the word but when I'm trying to make a big point here. It looks scarier than it is. White's king is safe on b1. You need more pieces to attack. What are you going to attack him with, a lone knight over here? You're attacking my pawn once. I already have 2 defenders. You can't get a bishop on this diagonal because you no longer have a bishop. Your queen can't get over to that diagonal because it takes a long journey. So I think Giria's position is improving, and she should be pretty happy about how this game is going, in my opinion. So knight back to d5. You can take on d5. You can just play e4 as well. Look at this expansion. You have all these pawns on the 4th rank. h5 at some moment, maybe now, is possible. F4 is possible. Knight E4 is possible. I see so many ideas here for white, and I'm struggling to come up with similar plans for black. It just feels like black is a little bit stuck. You can't push the C pawn yet because B5 falls. If you ever push B4, then you've given up all the control of the light squares. Taking on H4, have fun with that pawn. It's not really important. D5 is coming with his pawn G7 under attack and just blasting the position open. So Stefanova does take on H4, probably feeling like she has to do something, otherwise her position just falls apart. And I'm still looking for D5. I'm still looking for D5. Probably the best practical chance here, though, by Stefanova to take on H4. But I don't see the king on E8 ever being safe. At least fully safe. So Queen D2 is played so that the rooks now connect with each other. I actually really like them. G5 is an option, shutting the bishop off from the rook on H4. Also, if you castle queenside, I have bishop A5. So my queen and bishop are in the same line over there. Can I take, play G5, play rook H1, take this pawn back? Looks somewhat risky. F4, opening up the board. There's a king in the center. His rook on C1 is perfectly placed. Look at 4 of the pawns here on the 4th rank. It's the 4 pawns attack. Let me highlight them. Now it's only 3 pawns. Rook H8 check, you just block. Not the end of the world. Queen takes F4 though. Perhaps castle queenside? You can't. You lose F7. Frustrating. Now this is great compensation. Great compensation here. Still can't castle. F7 will be under attack. So how to make progress? D5. Rook F1. If F6, then G5, but then the king castles. So the king is actually getting to safety here. And here's castle queenside. You have to. You simply must. You have no choice. And now do you swing back over here, rook C1? She does not. She takes on F6. And where does the progress come from? 26 seconds for Giria. 26 seconds. I'm keeping an eye on the other matchup. I'm going to flip between them now because this one is very interesting. 20 seconds for Giria. I want to go here because after knight C7, black played E5, and the point is that bishop takes, there's queen E4 check, picking this bishop up, and if the knight takes on A8, it would get trapped. So queen C1 played, hoping that if queen takes C1, bishop takes C1, the rook is still trapped, and if queen E4 check, F3, queen takes C2, there's rook F2. I know it's a lot to take in. We're going to go back to the other game. Not enough time to go too deep there. D5 coming. And the sacrifice here, there was almost rook takes C6 there, didn't work. And now white is up in exchange for 2 pawns. So good compensation for black. Bishop D6, bishop E5 looks scary if you can make it happen, but this queen will come into D2, offer the trade. So E5, you can play queen C1. Some pressure here, but more pressure here. And if C5, then you can't take this pawn on it. What about queen D3? Pinning the rook, hitting this bishop. Looks good. Queen to D3. Pinning the rook. And then bring this knight into D4. If that knight gets to D4, uh-oh. That's a world of trouble. So queen D3 for Stefanova. Looks very, very good here. And C5 was the choice. I didn't like that move. I didn't like that move at all. So it's mutual time trouble. Let's bring Stefanova back on camera. She's sat up in her chair. She plays queen to D3. Uh-oh, here comes knight to D4. We play bishop E2. Or queen D1. Queen D1. It protected everything at the same time. This gives up the E4 pawn. Knight D4. Okay, so she has still good chances to hold because of obstacle of bishops, but not what you want to hear. Now Stefanova is up on time and has an extra pawn. And then bishop D7 is an important move to... Oh gosh, she let the pawns go. She let the pawns go. The king's coming right to E5. So A4, bishop D8, king E3, king E5. Oh no. Oh no, oh no, oh no. F4. So king D4 is a good move. Bishop D8. I put the bishop back on D8. Wait, how are you going to win this now? You need to kick the king out of here. So bishop d8, bishop h4. Put the bishop on d8. Oh, c4 check. Oh, and Stefanova, she gets it. She gets the game here. So way back here, I know the next game is about to happen. I just want to show really quickly. Here, she should have bishop d7 and force the pawns like this. So you split the pawns up and then you control the light squares with your king and your bishop. And you hold the game. So unfortunately, it was a missed opportunity. The second game now is underway. Let's go back to the other game because that is deeper into the second game. And let us pull the players on camera. And here we have Bibisara. So what's going on here? Queen on g5. So she already stolen a rook on a8. But she lost her bishop now. Wait, this is starting to look really bad for white. Can you take on e5? Then rook c2 check? Well, rook c2, the problem with ever moving your rook is this knight on b8 is left hanging. And then the knight actually can escape out to c7. But rook c2, my idea is that the rook after you take, king takes, and then queen takes h2 check. Then this pawn also is weak over here. So the queen dropped back. The knight is lost on a8. So what's the material count? It is just simply 2 minor pieces. It's a knight and bishop for a rook. So white is in big trouble here. Queen c4. Queen d2 check. There's rook f2. So the good news is even though you're down material, well, because you're down material, there's not too many things to threaten. So take back with the pawn, I imagine. Knight e5. I think knight e5 is good. You want to get your knight to e3 somehow. Whichever square it comes from. It comes from there, if it comes from c4. Here, queen d2 check is coming as well. So queen d3 played d5. Bring the knight to c4. But after d5, there's rook e1. I want to trade a pair of rooks. If I can trade one pair of rooks, black has a hard time defending many of the weaker squares. So far so good by Sara here. So rook f2, trading. And black is doing very well on the clock. Queen h4. Now take on f2 and queen d2 check. That's going to be painful. Bringing the queen into d2, winning c3. You're hoping for a queen trade, but even that was bad. This is really bad. It's unfortunate for Sara. She looks like she is going to be losing this game. Let's pull up her opponent on camera just to see her reaction as she heads towards a match victory. Probably a bit nervous. f4, queen e4 check. Looks worrisome. Knight e4 allows a draw. Or at least it looks like a draw. So you don't want to move this knight too soon because queen d8 and then... Yeah, this is it. Now it's an extra knight and an extra pawn. It's king... Oh my god, that scared me. Wait. Is that good? The king is coming here. That might have been bad. That might have been a mistake. Because this outside pawn here. Oh, she went for a tricky tactic. And king g6, h4. The king can't go steal this pawn because then I have h5. So king f5 takes g6. King d6. What's happening here? What is happening here? So g6. Is white winning? Oh my gosh, white might be winning. White is winning this game. Let's bring Sara back on camera because we just have to see her reaction here. As this game, she now queens. And she wins by checkmate. And she's so happy. You see that big smile and her relaxed in the chair? Oh my goodness. She was lost in that game. But she wins it. And that is pure joy. That's jubilation there. She's trying to be respectful and keep it to herself. But that is just an oh my moment. I don't think I deserved it, but I'm so happy to get it. So we'll go back to the other game for now, but good to see her so happy there. That was, she fought tooth and nails to the very end, and her opponent got tricky, went fancy, and then lost. Let's go to the other game. between Giria and Stefanova. What is happening here? Isn't Giria up a piece? Olga Giria is trying to fight back, and it looks like she's up a piece after losing the first game. And Giria's winning this game. So let's bring her on camera. Let's see how she's reacting here. She needs to win this game, and she's so focused here. The problem for black, the main problem is that the pieces are a little difficult to move. It's a little tricky to get them out. But now, that especially the king's on b8, once this knight moves from d6, this queen's under attack. But where can the knight really go? That's another question. So Giria is down half a minute on the clock, but she's up a piece for just one pawn. How did this happen? So earlier in the game, it was a Caro-Kann, which Giria is excellent at. Oh no. Stefanova went to take this bishop, and after g5, she just, I guess, forgot that this bishop moves either way. f4 happens. And so bishop g3, f4. So g5 was a really nice move that was overlooked by white, and an easy move to overlook because, like, oh, g5 forks my pieces, not a big deal. I take this bishop, but the bishop got trapped. So getting us back to the live position, rook he1 played. And as mentioned, the pieces stuck for black. You play bishop e7, I take you. And I have two rooks there, so I'll just win and give up my rook for two pieces, and then I'll be down in exchange. Knight c8 played smarter move. And queen b3. Don't allow rook takes c6. Be careful about that. The king's on b8. Bishop e4 is also coming with pressure on the diagonal. Bishop d6 maybe? Knight to b6 also possible. Bishop d6 played. Bishop e4. I think bishop e4, there might be knight a5. What a tricky move. I go knight a5. I hit your queen. Your queen is protecting your rook. Only thing protecting the rook. So if you move somewhere like queen to d5, I think I just have knight to b6. Again, attacking your queen, and your rook is in trouble. So rook takes f6 played. Stealing a second pawn for the lost piece. This bishop wants to go to f4, but remember, the knight on c6 is under attack because the pawn on b7 is pinned. So rook e8, trying to get a backline checkmate, it looks like, and trying to trade pieces while you're ahead. So knight e4 played. And wait, where does this bishop go? You can't move the bishop, you lose the knight on c6. The bishop is defended and the knight is pinned. That's the good news. So queen takes g2 is a move that comes to mind. What else? It's the main move. I see knight b6 in the future. I'm considering king a8 just to get the king out of dodge, out of the pin pawn on b7, but king on a8 is bad for certain positions where they're back rank checkmates. So a4 played. This king probably wants to escape via b1 to a2. And can black just play h5, h4, h3, h2, and get a queen? That's what I'm wondering. That's what I'm wondering here. So where's bishop b5? And the bishop stuck on d3, protecting this knight. So now what? Knight to d6, I'm guessing was the intention. Nice move. The knight is pinned to the rook. And now I am threatened to win a piece by capturing this knight here. I have 1, 2, 3 attackers. You only have 1, 2 defenders. So with that in mind, I am threatened to take on e4. So knight e4, there's rook c6, and then that has to be good. No, this is good for black. Knight takes e4. Take the piece. After rook takes c6, there's knight to d2, hitting the queen and hitting the rook on c6. So knight d2, and that's it. It's the only move you need to find here. She found it. She hits the queen. She hits the rook. You can not take the queen here because you get checkmate on the back rank. So you just take rook takes rook. And if I am Stefanova, I'm playing rook e6 here, just to keep things a little bit complicated, at least for a couple more moves. because otherwise queen takes c6 and the queen protects the rook. So rook e6 played. That's the best chance in a time scramble. And I would probably want to push this, but I know that bishop e4, rook e7 check, going after b7, something to keep an eye on. So Gira spending some time. She takes on f2, bishop c1, likely coming, and so is g4, g3, g2, g1. These pawns are unimportant, so I would ditch those pawns. King d8, good. Good move. Appreciate the compliments, thank you. So rook on h7, it is annoying just to see your pawns fall. Bishop c2, but if bishop's on c2, then I go g4, g3, and your bishop can't move because the pawn on b2 is hanging. So this actually keeps white totally stuck. G3, g2, and that's it. That's totally it. So Giria, for the second straight match, she lost her game with white to Zagnidze. She lost her game with white to Stefanova. And now with black, she's even the score in both games. Of course, this game is still going. There is a possibility for some blunder. She is up a queen. I feel pretty confident she's going to win this game. Queen d5 here, queen d8, good. This pawn on a5 is now gone. Or you give the pawn on b2. And now you take. You have queen b6 check. You take on b2. Everything is collapsing. In fact, it's checkmate coming up. So, bishop d2 next. Take this pawn. King c7, queen b4. All of this is good. Queen f4 check. Thank you for this pawn. And Giria, she is the comeback queen. So it seems like 2 games. She's won with the black pieces while down 1-0. She wins. Shake of the head. Like, what am I doing? What am I doing? And it was all thanks to the opening. She is a very strong Caro-Kann player. And I'll show the opening once again because it turned into a Caro-Kann, but it didn't start that way. It was a London-type system, but it got into an exchange Caro-Kann where after e4, c6, d4, d5, there was a capture on d5, and we get right back here. So it turned into a Caro-Kann. And after f6, which gives ideas of e5, it takes away the square from the knight, trying to go g5 as well. Well, Stefanova walks right into g5, not realizing, and this mistake is completely understandable, that f4 happens and traps the bishop. So you would think that if first is bad, white has the bishop pair and these pawns are double, but the bishop is trapped. So that's a good win for Giria. We'll get to the next game in a second here. And let's see. All right. Giria has the white pieces. Stefanova with black. Let us switch the cam for a quick second here so that we can put on Stefanova. We just had Giria on the camera for quite an extended period of time. Let's see how Stefanova bounces back because she has been in the knockout stage several days. She needs just to draw with the black pieces. She's playing quick in the opening. That's good. Nana Zagnidze was taking more of her time, and that caused some problems as she got into time trouble later in the game, and Giria was able to win. So right now here, it's looking very solid for white, and Giria has 50 seconds advantage. So Stefanova has cut into the time deficit. That's great for her. And b3 played. You can play a4 now. Play for a flexible approach. Maybe consider a5. Consider bishop a3. Because the bishop on b2 is behind a wall of pieces. Not getting open that soon. So bishop a3 at least puts pressure on e7. And okay, so cd5, c7. The good news for about this for white is that there's no knight on c6, because this knight on d7. Think about what I tell you. A knight, when a pawn is 3 squares away from a knight, the knight is the one that's dominated. And here the pawn d4 is taking away this knight's access. Knight e5 played, hoping that the trade opens up the position for white's pieces. Stefanova doesn't even react. Here comes f4, reinforcing this knight here. This knight is now hanging. Play queen to d2, I think. Rook c1 also good. And you can play knight e4. Plays e6. And 30 seconds advantage. Or 35, more or less. For white. So Giria needs to play it quickly. Stefanova is confident. There's no increment in the Armageddon. Nothing. So every single move, you're not gaining any more time. It's about to be even on the clock. We're getting closer and closer to time equality here. And bishop c4, I expect. Good. Keep more pieces on the board. Then play queen to e2. Go after this pawn on a6. Their ideas with f5, you have to be very careful because f5, you can't take with the e pawn because f7, and you take with the g pawn. Maybe I have rook takes f5 sacrifice. Actually, f5 is really interesting here. I don't know if it works. Probably does not work. But f5, like I said, you take this way, down goes f7. You take this way, rook takes, knight f7. There are discoveries on your king because your queen's under attack. Queen c7 though, I didn't find the next move, and that's what was bothering me about that sacrifice. So b4, knight to d5, b5, good. Takes, bishop takes. Your rook on e8 is stuck. So Stefanova has a tough choice. She plays a5. Now knight can come into c6. You do not want to take that and give white a pass pawn, but queen to d7. I think you can consider taking this. You don't have to. You can start with rook to c. Didn't like that move. Felt a little bit slow. So trade bishops, play rook c2. And let's switch the cam to Giria. I'm curious how she's feeling about her position. She looks very focused as always. And okay, so rook takes. Oh, nice tactic. If queen takes rook, there was knight e7 check. Now rook g5 check first, and then take here. Ooh, do you take with the pawn or the rook? That's the essential question. Both look good. She takes with the pawn, giving herself a passed pawn. And if the queen doesn't blockade it, I get to push to c7. The queen does blockade it. Oh gosh, this is a problem. There's a problem. Giria looks like she's taking this one. You have to defend d5. How do you do that? You play a move like rook to d8, then I play c7, distracting your rook. Then I take this pawn on d5. And this king isn't safe either. Everything is looking bad for black all of a sudden. So, Olga Giria, she lost the first game against Zagnidze. She won the match 2-1. She lost the first game here against Stefanova. Now she's looking to be in good shape to win this one. Okay, queen to a3, hit the rook, hit the pawn. Queen c3, good move. I'm looking at queen h4, protecting the rook and also with some ideas, with checkmating ideas. But this pawn c6, oh no. King f2, and then rook takes d5, but this pawn a4 is also in check. Stefanova made her way out of this. Maybe pawn takes c6 was the wrong choice in the end. Maybe that was the wrong choice. Right here, maybe taking the rook, just freezing many of black's pieces. Still had chances for black, but the activity was able to get Stefanova that pawn c6. That was a dangerous pawn. I think you kind of have to play like rook to b5, but then I'm looking at rook e6, rook f6. It's not like this king is so happy here. What to do? What to do? I'm trying to come with an attack. This rook e6, rook f6 idea is really bothering me. And the pawn a4 is under attack. That's also bothering me. And let me switch cams to bring on Stefanova again. See how she's reacting here. Where she's looking at the clock, she's looking at the board. Rook f5 played. This pawn f7 is important. She gives up f7. She's okay giving up f7. I don't feel as okay as she does about it. Queen h6, that's a checkmate threat. And if f6, then rook takes f6, and this rook is under attack twice. And you got to take back on f6 with a check if the rook takes. So rook f6 looks good. This king is less safe. This king is on f2. So maybe queen to b4, just trying to get a hold of the f8 square. Where's the white king going? That's the essential question. Where is the white king going? You want to play h3 or bring the king like this way. You want to play g3 bring the king to g2. But all of those squares still have problems. And wait, 50 seconds left for Stefanova. She only has 50 seconds. She is in big time trouble here. King g3 actually can be played. There's no queen d6 check. There's only one check here, king h3, and the king is actually tucked for the moment. So king g3 is risky, I know that, but you got to risk it to get the biscuit. And this queen on b4 is trying to come back to e7, trying to help out in the defense. If the queen gets to e7, you're attacking the rook, you're protecting your rook, you're protecting the pawn on h7 from the mating attack. But Giria needs to move. She's been up on the clock. G3 play, excuse me. King trying to escape. She went by rook f4. Taking on f8 would allow a queen trade. That would have been bad. Take with the g pawn. Now rook g8. The b6 pawn was hanging. Rook c2. Rook c5. Rook e5. Something like that. And we're getting down to the final stretch here. 44 seconds for white. 38, 37 for black. Counting down, no increment. Can't forget that. The black king is in worse shape than the white king, but black's pawns are advancing quite quickly. So rook takes b5 is a free pawn if I'm not mistaken. You can just go and grab the pawn, then a3, a2. It's about the quality of the pawns rather than the quantity, and that a pawn moving down the board so quickly feels advantageous for black. But the king's still so unsafe, so d5 play to cut off the queen from the queen side. So queen a6, swinging to this side of the board is possible. Then queen h5. Uh-oh, queen h5. Then queen f6 check. Not the end of the world, but it's a check that you need to be on alert for. Wait, white is down. How is white down so much time? I stopped looking at the clock, and white is the one down after d5. Okay, this is about to be a time scramble. So is this d-pawn promoting first? Doesn't look like it. Take king g7, d6, a2, d7, a1. Queen g4 check maybe, but this is... You can't win this game. Queen g6. Oh, but the clock. Let's look at the clock. Stefanova brings her keeper. Wait, d7. D7, you get a promote with check. So she repeats and play d7. Look at that. d8 equals queen. Watch out. Queen g5, then a1 equals queen. And then you get a queen. This is tricky. This is very tricky with no time. So queen 3. She gets the move off. You have to pre-move. Start pre-moving moves. This is easier for white to play with all the checks. Oh my gosh. Just check her. And it's over. It's over, and Stefanova loses on time after fighting off that position. Let us bring Giria back here. See how she's... Oh, she is jubilant. She's so happy. Oh my gosh, what a way to do this. Because she was the one, if we just go back in time to this position, right around here, she spent so much time playing d5 because she realized that black's pawns are pushing... Black's queen has access here. She needs to create counterplay and push her pawn. So she plays d5. She plays queen a6. She's down about 13 seconds on the clock. And then after b4, she plays rook c8. She's still down half the time. But this is what happens when you start creating threats on your opponent. This pawn can't move because your queen will take it. This pawn can't move because you'll take this pawn. So then rook takes. And now you give a d6. You know, wait, what's happening? These pawns are going. So a2, check. Now, do I move my king? Do I move my queen? Queen g6, I think, was a good move. Instead, the king went back and forth. And now d7, like, oh gosh, that's a queening with check and a mate. So I need to put my queen back. And then queen g5. And now it's 5.7 to 7.4. So the advantage on the clock is still in black's favor. But it's black's turn. And it's very tricky because white is the one with all the checks. So at this point in time, maybe throwing in a queen a2 or a queen b2 check would have been useful. But it's hard to like get in full bullet mindset at this point. It's a very nerve-wracking situation, and Olga Giria, all smiles now. She wins on the clock, and she qualifies to the Women's Speed Chess Championship. So she left the Zoom call, as you saw. The call is over. All the players done with here, and Olga Giria and Sara Asubayeva, who, if we go back to that game, if I still have that open, oh my goodness. Just to finish off my thoughts for the day, where was it? Right around here, Sara was down a piece, a full piece, and her opponent got fancy, unfortunately, for her. She went queen f2 check, thinking she was forcing liquidation. But by doing this, after knight takes g5, pawn takes g5, all of a sudden you're like, wait a sec, that king is real fast to capture my pawn. And what black was probably hoping for was bringing the king into g4 and taking g3. But after king g4, king d6, you can't take g3 because I have h5. And now I'm going h6, and I'm getting a queen. So instead of capturing g3, she played g6 to stop the pawn. But now she's too slow over here, and Sara was able to promote her pawn. So, wow, what a crazy turn of events there at the end. Olga Giria getting in time trouble, having to win with the white pieces. She did it twice. She is the Armageddon champion of the day, winning both times with the white pieces. And for Sara Asabayeva, she is, she knows she was fortunate. She had a huge smile. She felt so relieved. She fell back in her chair, was thrilled. But when you fight tooth and nail, you don't resign, and your opponent gets fancy, that gives you a chance to come back. And so, unfortunately for Alina Tomilova, she made this queen f2 check move completely unnecessarily. She, of course, regrets it. She had 47 seconds on her clock. There was no need for that. The black king is totally safe. Just push your pawns. This happens in blitz chess. Everyone does it. We all make mistakes. I've gone plenty of times for a fancy way to liquidate, thinking I'm just winning. And you think, I'm up a pawn now. Black is up a pawn, 5-on-4. And so we're signing off. Anna Cromling's getting the raid. We will return tomorrow, same time, same place, noon Eastern time, 9 a.m. Pacific, wherever you are in the world. You can figure out the time there, but it's going to be the 3-minute time segment. So on that note, I'm out. Enjoy Anna Cromling, and I'll see you tomorrow.